Thank you.
There's Catherine.
Okay, it's 5 o'clock. We'd like to welcome everybody to this study session of the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education. We'll give everybody a minute to run to their seats. Thank you for joining us. We're here at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, February 23rd. We'll start from 5 to 6 with a study session to discuss and study our late start. As you know, the board voted last March to begin our high schools at around no earlier than 8:30. And we have new board members, and we have, a good year between then and now, and just a few months to get that up and running. And so we're here for the purpose of studying this topic. And Superintendent, do you want to introduce all of the great people we have here on this meeting so that to present to us and discuss with us?
I'm happy to do that. I'm going to have to look around and find them all. Okay, so in this first part for the study session, Jeremy Chatterton is here, Kelly Orton, I saw Melanie Francis, and Sudam. And Jeremy, did I get everyone that's here for this part? Oh, Cynthia Morley. Yeah.
Cynthia Morley, yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for allowing us to come and present. I think really we've reorganized our information a little bit, wanted to share some additional information that we have, and then answer any questions that you might have for us. Want to really thank Kelly and his team for putting together some additional spreadsheets for us to be able to look at and kind of get a better idea of not only what impact start times will have, but also be able to look at the more direct impact of what that would cause in terms of requirement for the district hiring bus drivers, looking at the overall energy savings, things like that, right? So looks like I can share. No, I cannot share. Can whoever's hosting allow me to share?
Okay, you should be good.
Thank you. All right, so should all be able to see this now. So down, we have different tabs. We've gotten a bunch of different options here that what we've put together. So really it's, and I can let Kelly kind of address this as much as he would like also. So Kelly, please feel free to jump in when you can. But really looking at the 2-tier and then now looking at a true 3-tier option. So the 3-tier that we had at least put out before wasn't a true 3-tier, and that really it just took high schools and had 2 different start times. But in this option, we have actually put a true 3-tier pattern together as well. So here we have, our 2-tier, which is the least amount of change to schools based on their start times last year. So this is not this year. This is based on their start times last year. So this would be the least amount of change for those schools. And over here on this side, you can see where our start times are. So we have 8 or 8:45. We don't have anybody at the 9:30 start time on this 2-tier. So it's 8 or 8:45. And then you can see based on if they're A or B, if their start time would now be 8 or 8:45. And then the impact that would have on each of those schools compared to what their current start time is. Similar to what we had talked about before with the 2-tiers, is very similar to the 2-tier we had presented before. Really, the biggest impact you're going to see is on middle schools having to now being required to start at 8 o'clock. Elementaries would all be split between 8 or 8:45, and then your high schools would all be moving to 8:45. The schedule we've put together would be high schools going 8:45 to 3 o'clock. Elementaries and middle schools, or excuse me, middle schools and the 8 o'clock start time would be 8 to 2:15. So just to kind of give you a general idea of what that would look like. I can also share with you what, for example, a high school bell schedule would look like on that calendar. So this would be our two lunch bell schedule, what we would be looking at 8:45 to 10:09, 5-minute passing period between each class, being able to get out of school at 3 o'clock and run the buses in that way. The other option, so excuse me, so here's the other one that would be, then now this would have more of an impact on elementaries. This would create more of a two-tiered balance. So this would balance out elementaries similar to what Kelly and his team have done this year. Is that right, Kelly?
That's correct.
Yeah, so this is more closely aligned to what start times we're running this year for elementary schools. This would match their times this year. Again, it would move middle schools to the 8 o'clock start time, high schools to the 8:45 start time. What you want to see is the number of drivers. So running this model would require, based on the number of buses we're running currently, 68 drivers. To do the least amount of change, it would require 77 drivers. So you can see moving to the schedule, for example, that Kelly's put in place this year with balancing out the routes as much as possible. He's been able to save on having nine drivers less by putting that together. So those are two options that we could have in terms of what a two-tier would look like. Questions on the two-tier?
Jeremy,
Yes.
this is Christy.
Hi, Christy.
So can you tell us what would be the earliest time that students would have to be at a bus stop? So maybe since the middle schools have to start at 8, what time would kids have to be at the bus stop in order to catch the bus to get to school on
So
time?
I'm gonna let Kelly and Cynthia answer that. They're gonna have a better.
So we've talked about, our goal is to do a 45-minute from pickup to drop off. And as you look down there, we are planning on just plan on 1 hour before the first bell is the earliest that we would have, we'd be picking up children at their homes and bringing to school. So 1 hour before the bell on the AM routes. Our goal is to have them there in time for breakfast. That's not always the case, but that is for about 99% of the time, according to what I'm talking to. Cynthia can speak on this, but we are going to get them to at least not earlier than 7 o'clock on an 8 o'clock
Right.
schedule.
Because if you want them there to have breakfast, that means that they're going to need to be at the school at least by 7:45 with an
Correct.
8 o'clock bell. And that would give them, 15 minutes. So that means at the very earliest, that it would be 7 a.m. that the first.
Yes, there are a few outliers, of course, on special needs students. We have to fill the buses to a certain capacity, and some of our special needs students are scattered all over the place. So there may be 1 or 2 times where they may be just a little over that, but not much.
So that was my second question, was about our special ed students, because I remember when we were doing our town hall meetings that we had a family that spoke to us specifically about how hard it was to get their child ready to be actually at school even at the time that they had to be, and that to push it earlier was it was such a hardship for them. So I think it would be good for us to know, what that really looks like with our SPED students, so that we can talk about that. I think that's really important. That was really poignant to me, hearing from that family, talking about how long it takes them to ready their child to be on that bus.
Melanie, I don't know if you have anything you would want to add to that either, or
Yes,
experiences you've heard.
Cynthia's here, and she's the one who routes these. We have a procedure in place where our goal is no more than 45 minutes okay, on the bus. And that is our standard goal that we have. There are those few exceptions, those outliers that we really can't help but run those buses a little further to pick up students that are further out. And we have to staff the buses by one wheelchair student plus another person, or Cynthia, what is it, 4, 5?
So for full funding, you need 5 walk-ons or 1 wheelchair and 1 walk-on.
Correct. So there are those standards we have to follow too. So as you'll see, that it's just something that we can't guarantee 100%, but that is our plan. That's what we work towards. And in the first of the year, we always start out with our best guess, and then we work into a better flow as the time goes, within a couple of weeks, we're on task, and I think we're there. So Cynthia, you were saying a percentage of people who are over that 1 hour time spot in your career.
So my goal, so 45 minutes is like the longest. I think right now I have most of my routes routed between 35 and 40, but I do have one hillside route that's right at about 55 minutes, just because hillside is so spread out. I have students clear over by Northwest Middle School. I have students up behind the Capitol. I have them right in the middle of the city. So just to get 5 students in the bus within the city of the whole city like that, it's a little longer.
Thank you.
Melanie, did you want to add anything to that also?
I do. I have heard back from some of our hub parents about that concern that 8 a.m. is early, but that is generally the time that those hub schools are starting. It is an early time to get your kid ready, and some parents do choose to transport their own child so they do not have to wait for that time, just because it is a lot of kids on the bus. I can't speak specifically for Essential Elements parents. I haven't heard from any of them. A lot of them have later start times, minus like Meadowlark, which starts earlier. So the impact on those families, I would say, has not been looked at with enough emphasis, so we would have a good conversation about that.
Great. And I will say, so for example, Emerson, one of our hub schools, their start time prior to this year was 7:55, so even earlier than what we're proposing at the 8 o'clock start time. So it's not necessarily a new thing for many of those parents. It's kind of what they've been experiencing currently.
So my last question, did you have a chance to talk to our middle school principals and get feedback about the change to the 8 a.m.?
Yes, and I'd invited Marissa to be here also. She had a conflict, Marissa Howtell, principal at Northwest Middle School. But really they seemed to be very comfortable with the 8 o'clock start time. I think their biggest concern that had been relayed to us was high schools currently getting out so much earlier than middle schools. And so they'll often have high school kids waiting at middle schools for the middle school kids to get out. She commented that was an issue that they've had at Northwest and at Glendale. And so something that they felt that this would help alleviate.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, can I ask a question about
Sure.
this chart? There are a few elementary schools, a handful of them, that have fairly significant changes from their current times.
Yes.
Is that something you've talked to those schools about, or how was the decision made to have those schools be the ones that have such, I mean, some of them are as much as an hour.
Yeah, I'll let Kelly address that because that's happening this year.
This is
Okay.
what we've said as a schedule. We have not considered hurting anybody's feelings. We just said, if we want to look at this by the numbers of what it takes to do the job to balance it, this would be a balanced program because there's not as many special needs students. I mean, the buses, we have half of our special need buses in the elementaries. And so we have to spread those out. This was done to get them to the closest to the current time slot. But we also have to balance up 3 buses to 2 buses. Special need buses are different than regular ed buses. They're equipped differently. They have different capacities. So we had to match those up too. So this is strictly by the numbers. We have not went to talk to any schools on this. We just presented it as an option that we could move forward with if we chose.
Now, Kelly, my understanding also though is that this is currently, so for example, what we're doing this year right now is many of these schools have moved times pretty significantly to accommodate for buses. So due to COVID restrictions, a lot of these schools are currently have had their times changed to match what this with what is on this schedule.
That is correct. They're currently running this. I think there's one exception. I'm trying to remember which one we had to move, but everything else, I think they're all running that currently.
So it wouldn't be that big of an impact compared to where they are right now.
Correct.
This is an impact compared to where they have been in previous years.
Please let me help you understand with COVID and a number of drivers, we went to the high schools, middle schools and elementaries and told them our situation. We currently only have 68 drivers. Well, I should restate that. We have 66 drivers right now. 6 of those are out on leave right now. And if you look at the total routes, we don't have enough drivers to run the routes that we currently have. So we were working, this is better than 77, but it's still not there. So Cynthia and Jordan, many of our staff at the office are out running routes too. We have 10 hourly on-call field trip part-time drivers, but they can't run both routes. Some are high school coaches that run activity trips. So we just don't have the people to staff more than what we have right now. And the schools have been very good to jump on board and run this 2-tier system we're currently running. And it's the only way we could have done this.
Okay, so the next options. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Mohammed. So I have a question. So as I'm looking at the chart, I'm seeing some schools that have like 0. Let's say, for example, Whittier, it shows 0, 0, 0, 0, and then yeah, some of them have A, some have X's. Why are there zeros and why are there X's in there?
Let me.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
X's are those who currently schools that do not require busing of any kind. A would be the tier 1 schedule, B would be tier 2. The zeros means that there's no riders, no buses currently. The one exception, if you'll see on Whittier, and you have Emerson, Whittier, and
Hawthorne,
they run the ELP program. So they're tied to the Whittier number, the Emerson numbers. Those numbers are for Emerson plus the ELP program that services those other 2 schools.
Perfect, thank you.
So that would also, I think, be part of the conversation that needed to be had was on these schools that don't require busing, these elementary schools. Do we still want to, or would you still want to require them to be on one of those 2 start times?
So, Jeremy, could I
yes.
ask maybe to help clarify that, to tell us why, maybe do the pros and the cons as to why it would be a good idea for us to all be on the same schedule versus a school being able to choose, if they don't have any bus riders, their own start time. Could maybe tell us the 2 sides to that?
Yeah, I think obviously the first benefit is teacher equity, right? I mean, all teachers being on that same schedule and students being on that same schedule. I think also there's a concern that, say, for example, and this has happened in the past where we've had one student that will move into a neighborhood and go to that school and they will require a bus. At that point, are you going to make the whole school change for that one student? And is that something that you would want to have to put on a new student and their family? So I think that's also a concern with that. The pros obviously is that it allows for that shared governance piece. It allows for those schools to be able to determine their own start and end times and what works best for them. But that's.
I believe you can understand as we go through these different schedules, there's a sustainability issue too.
Yeah.
Amount of buses required, amount of fuel and to transport the students. It reduces as you go to a 3-tier, and as you move to a balanced, you'll see a better, need less drivers, less buses to run our program.
So personally, for me, I would recommend requiring all schools to go to one of the 2 start times, but that's not a decision I make. So,
Can I just jump in real quick? I just wanted to let you guys know. So the scenario Jeremy just mentioned, that a student would move into a school and require busing, that's happened to us the last 2 years. Last year I had a wheelchair child that I needed to transport to Mountain View, and they already had their bell schedule, so he was late every day because that's when we could get the bus there. And this year I had that happen, that same scenario happen at Jackson Elementary. And that one worked out because we were able to shorten the route prior to that, but that's not always going to happen.
Okay, so we can look at the 3-tier option now. So I'll go ahead and click on that. So this is going to create really a three true start times. So an 8 o'clock, an 8:45, and a 9:30 start time. Really what this is going to do is it's going to push all of your elementary schools to the 8 o'clock start time. So this would go all elementaries at 8, all middle schools at 8:45, and then the 3 high schools at 9:30. You could obviously flip these two, but I don't know if that's something you would want to do in terms of a lot of middle schoolers are getting their elementary siblings ready in the morning. And this would leave a lot of time in the afternoon where elementary kids would maybe be without supervision. The benefit is this is, again, you can see that the number of drivers goes down again. Only 63 drivers would be required for this setup. Challenges obviously is basically, you know, if we're taking that bell schedule that we just looked at, where it had an 8:45 start time and a 3 o'clock end time, if we're pushing this 45 minutes, we're pushing this 45 minutes. So it would be now 9:30 to 3:45. So high schools would be getting out at 3:45. That's very worrisome for many high school, obviously athletics and other after school activities. Currently, most of our games start at 3:30. Our varsity games that are outside, for example, in the fall and in the winter and the spring, excuse me, all have 3:30 start times. So those students would be missing fourth period every time, at least fourth period every time they needed to check out. But again, this would save in terms of drivers, and it would really save in terms of the footprint, the carbon footprint we'd be putting out. This is a high school late start balanced again, but this has some of your elementaries also moving to different times. So this is just balancing out the numbers a little bit more. So again, middle schools and high schools would stay 8:45 and 9:30. Elementaries, for the most part, as you can see, would stay on the 8 o'clock time, but we have 2, Parkview and Dilworth, that would move to 8:45, and then Highland Park and Nibley Park that would move to 9:30. What this is able to do, though, as you can see, is it allows us, it takes 10 drivers off the number of drivers required. So only 54 drivers would be required in this example. Kelly and his team also did the same numbers with the 3-tier, but instead of having elementaries be first, we moved elementaries to the C schedule, to the 9:30 schedule. So again, elementaries going at 9:30, the middle schools going at 8 o'clock, high schools going at 8:45. Again, that takes you up to the 63 drivers. Or you can do that same thing and balance it. Again, most of your elementaries on the 9:30 schedule, middle schools at 8, high schools at 8:45. A few of your elementaries switched up. And again, that would require 53 drivers. Also just wanted to show you, as I've been putting this together, at least, again, Kelly and his team really put all of this together. So huge thank you to them. As I've been looking at the stuff, though, I want to make sure we are getting our hours in. So I am using last year's calendar that had been presented to us. So this goes to 8 o'clock to 2:15. This is what every school has to put together to make sure we're hitting our instructional hours. if you guys haven't seen it, but 8 o'clock to 2:15 with your 30-minute lunch. And then included in that a short day for elementaries, right, which is important. So 8 and having them get out at 1:10 on Fridays is where I put that. So you can look at a calendar here. S would be the short days. So that's typically on your Fridays or your last day of the week, all your regular days. And where that would get us to is 1,001 hours. So we would be able to hit our hour mark that is required by the board, which is 1,000 hours. And the conversation would have to happen at the high school level, because I don't think I had initially put this together for a late start, which is what we've done in the past on Mondays. But I don't think that's something that we could really do in this case due to what we've kind of talked about. But I want to make sure, you know, initially when I was putting this together, if we still got to our hours, and yes, we would also still get to 1,001 hours if we were to implement this, incorporating a late start still from September through spring break.
Jeremy, it probably needs to be said on each of these options that if you go from a 2-tier to a 3-tier, the option to have everyone do their own schedule as far as early outs Fridays or late starts Mondays becomes almost impossible, because you are matching up within 45 minutes is the next school, and we have to transport the students to the next school after the first tier. What I'm trying to get at is if you went to a 2-tier or 3-tier in the future, it's more than likely that all schools would have to be on the same late start or early out scenario. So the buses would continue to run the same schedule. To deviate from that, I don't believe we would have the capacity to do that as a transportation department. So that's one area. It's choice, just being very straightforward, is the choice of having your own way at every school, or put some guidelines in where you bring the schools into a certain pattern where it's makes it more efficient to transport the students. That's the difference we're talking about here, is how much freedom do you give schools compared to how much guidelines do you put in there to make it so we can run this program. You can't have multiple schools on late starts, early outs, and make this work with a 3-tier system.
Yeah, it would have to be something where, you know, all elementaries, well, and really middle schools and high schools agreed that, okay, we're all going to do a late start schedule, and here's the day we're going to do it. And, you know, or not a late start, but an early out, right? To be able to provide that PLC time that's so critical to what happens in school. Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. First, I see that as you said, we have 66 drivers currently, you know, you know, maybe it's a kind of stupid question, but can't we get more drivers? Like, I know it's really hard to get more bus drivers. I know that it's not just like something you can just learn that quick, but we have now till, what is it, August, for this to be implemented, where there could be. So that's one question, is like, and I have more questions, but can that one be answered first?
Sure.
I can answer,
yeah, go ahead,
answer that. We can't find, we are currently been looking, begging people to come and be employed with us as bus drivers. And Cynthia and her team are out there driving buses, not because we want them to, it's because we can't find anybody to drive our buses. And we are doing everything we can just to survive through this year. And it's not something it's been an ongoing problem. The contract drivers, we have contract drivers. We usually get contract drivers. Those are easy to fill, correct, Cynthia? It's the hourly ones that without benefits and that are hard to find.
It's also, just to piggyback on that, it's also hard to hire now for August, September, because we can't employ them with enough hours during the summertime, so they don't stay. So it's harder to hire now. It's almost pointless to hire now for September. So, I mean, we usually start looking around end of July, 1st of August to start. Most of our drivers can be trained in about 5 weeks. So that's when we start looking, but it's just hard to get people to come work for us for 20 hours a week with no benefits.
What does a bus driver pay, if I may ask?
$20.55 an hour.
Okay, so thank you for answering that. That's, lots of institutional, I think, things just in general for that we have to think about for the future. My other thing was, this is just a question because I don't know the answer. When I was in high school, I graduated 11 years ago, we used the high schoolers, at least West High School, we would go to the UTA, right? So I don't know what the relationship and why it changed, or are we doing that, like, which reduced, so the buses that were used for at least high schoolers, I don't know specifically West, I don't know if it was used for East and Highland too, were from the city. And I don't know if it's changed because of the costs or whatever, but the busing was all through UTA. And so students had the UTA pass, which I think was actually very helpful for lots of students, because if they missed currently what I've seen with my siblings when it went to the buses, they missed it, they would have to take the UTA bus anyways for different situations, but then they would have to pay out of their own pocket. But that's just things that I was thinking about, of like, we're missing bus drivers. What happened to the relationship we had with UTA? And just kind of just kind of knowing what that means. And I'm not pushing any agenda, or like that doesn't have to happen, but just learning from why that happened and what's possible in the future, especially if we're missing bus drivers. And there are public buses that students do use already anyways, at least high schoolers, right?
Correct. We do have UTA bus passes that we have a tap on, tap off passes that we provide to students who qualify for funding. Those are those who are more than 2 miles away from the school, live more than 2 miles away. At West High, we have quite a few of those bus passes we give out each year. We do have a delineation of Redwood Road. Anything west of Redwood Road, we still use our yellow buses to transport those students. We found that it just takes them a long time on UTA to get there. The stops are not where we need to be, so we continue to do that. Anything east of Redwood Road and more than 2 miles away from West High, they're currently using the bus passes. We also have Horizonte using these tap-on UTA bus passes. And we use them other places where it seems a better fit for the community, more economically and better for the students. So we are doing that, but not fully. Not all schools are there, mostly because of where their bus stops are. And they live next to tracks. I mean, West High is right there close by tracks. We can do that. So.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is West High's location makes it pretty conducive to being able to use public transportation, whereas our other high schools, it's not quite as convenient currently with where we're located.
UTA has also stopped and eliminated some of their services for getting to our high schools for our students. They've done that this year. I don't know that it was prompted by COVID, and I don't know that it will continue, but that's something to keep in mind, is the capacity. Like some of our routes for West High, they were running 2, 3, 4 buses. Now they're down to 1 or 2 buses. So that's a little bit of a change this year too.
I think one area that might even be worth for this board exploring is, I know, for example, the city is looking at redoing 9th South right now. Is there a way that we could ask the city to put in an express lane during morning and afternoon for buses, so that our students aren't on the bus, especially those students that we have in the Glendale area that are coming up to East and Highland? Is that something that, a request that we could put in and make that partnership with the city? I don't know, but it might be worth a call.
And I just wanted to add, relative to your question, Joel, our Education Foundation Board also coordinates and has a really strong relationship with UTA, where we have bus passes for students. So that's courtesy of James and our Ed board, our Ed Foundation Board.
Those were my main questions that I had. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I did busing my whole student life, and so I understand this very well. And I live past Redwood Road, west of Redwood Road, so I understand that specific thing that you brought up. But I did not live in Glendale, and so I'm sure Jenny's children and community members understand the ridiculousness of busing from the completely other side of the country, of the city, to go to the east side, right? But yeah, I think this is a big problem, and I'm glad we're discussing this. And yeah, it seems complicated, but I think these proposals we see a lot of benefits in the different ones, and I think this study session is really, really helpful for me. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mohammed. All right, so we know that the 3-tier is going to be a bit of a challenge, you know, especially the 9:30 late starter. That's not going to fly with the football avid families. Probably with soccer families, it'll be all right, like myself. And so that's one issue. The other thing too is we need to keep in mind is in regards to early end of school on Fridays, because the teachers will be able to have a chance to do their professional learning communities. So that's something. So if that is the case, it appears like, let me understand this again. So number of drivers we will need if we were to put high school at 8:45 and then, you know, keep middle school what it is and elementary where it is. What are we looking in terms of drivers here?
So there's not an option if you move high schools to 8:45, and you wanted to balance out the numbers as much as possible. Middle schools are going to have to go at 8 o'clock. So they're going to have to go at 8 o'clock, which is different. As you can see, they're all right now between 8:30, 8:24 and 8:30. So pushing them back to 8 o'clock, that would still require us to have 68 drivers. And again, this is the balanced schedule. So this would be having a few of your elementaries having a change from, or excuse me, on the 2-tier, this would be your elementaries all either be 8 or 8:45. Middle schools, 8 o'clock, high schools, 8:45.
That one resembles what we're doing today.
Correct.
Please understand also, there's something very important, is that we have students that go from 6th grade to 7th grade next year. We have those going from middle school to high school that are special ed education students. Got about 30, 34 going to each group. So maybe there'll be fewer needs in the elementaries or less. There is some change every year, and we don't know what it's going to look like until we get there. So to say these schools are going to be here, we can make our best guess and go forward, but there will be always changes. And those changes will affect our driver and how many buses we need.
Jeremy, can I ask a question? I'm with Mohammed. I think that 9:30 is a little too late. And I think you might find that the soccer families are unhappy about that too, right? A lot of those games start at 3:30, but
Yeah.
if we move to 2-tier with an 8 and an 8:45, I guess what I'm thinking about are families, and I was once in this position, who have kids really at all 3 schools, but don't have transportation from the school district provided. So getting kids to school where they can walk is great, but that wasn't really an option for where I am for some of the schools. So I'm a little wondering what you're thinking about in terms of what possibilities might be if you've got an elementary school, say, and a high school student that start at exactly the same time, or a middle school and an elementary school student that start at exactly the same time. Can you help me kind of think through how we might help parents navigate that space to getting, kids at different places at the
Different place, same time. I think fortunately, I think there's a little bit of a built-in buffer there in terms of with our breakfast times, right? Most schools are open and available at least half an hour before the start of school. So I think you have that opportunity, depending on which student you want to get there first or whatever was going on with that family, where typically our schools aren't more than 20 minutes away if you have 2 kids that are in the same area. Now, again, that can sometimes not be the case when we're talking about students in the Glendale area, but I do believe that most, if not all, of those students would qualify for transportation, for busing, so that option would be available. But again, where you live, where I live, right? It wouldn't be an issue for me to be able to drop one child off at, say, middle school at one time and an elementary school, with that 30-minute buffer that we have of the doors being open and breakfast being served. And I can tell you from experience that's happening now. I mean, you have elementary kids that are getting dropped off at, school starts at 8:30 and they're showing up at 7. And it's just kind of
It's true.
making it work.
Jenny and Catherine, I don't want to ask another question unless you guys have got questions. So if you guys have questions, please go, and then I'll come back around after that.
I think that this is all really clear. What I'd love to do is get a copy of of those charts. Jeremy, you could give us a copy of those charts so we could really take a close look at them and how they impact the schools in our districts. Like I said, I think that this has been a huge amount of work for you and for Kelly and other people, and I really appreciate your doing it. I'm excited to give our students the benefits of late start, and I'm excited for that to happen for those high school students. And I do see the needs for busing. I really understand those needs. I would love to do what we can do for that. I just would like to remind everyone that our first priority should be on the students, if it can't, unless we have no financial flexibility at all. So that our first priority should always be the student, what's good for the students.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, so Jeremy, there's a couple of questions that have come to mind for me, and it was back when you were talking about instructional hours.
Okay.
So right now, a high school student has about between 1,050 and 1,060 instructional hours when we had our traditional schedule. Obviously not our COVID year, because we haven't met that at all. Yes. But going back to that traditional block schedule, it sounds like what I thought I heard you say is that now it would be right just 1,001 hours at the high school level. Correct. So really, I just want us to be transparent. I'm like Catherine is, I can see the benefits of the late start, but I want us to be really transparent that what we're saying is that will be about 50 hours of instructions less for our high school students. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
50 hours less of it, yes, in school time, yes.
In school time.
A lot of that was taking, making classes 5 minutes shorter,
right?
Each period, right? And a lot of that was, so I mean, obviously that can be played with, right? I mean, if we wanted to push these times back and do it 8:45, and instead of getting out at 3, make it 3:15, we could do that, and then also push elementaries to 2:30. I think what we're really trying to focus on is allowing high schoolers to still try and get out by 3,
right,
or as close to that as possible.
And I would not advocate for any later than 3 o'clock. I think 3 o'clock is already probably setting some people's hair on fire, because right now what I'm hearing you say, and the reason I bring this up is that it's impossible for us to go to 2:30 because we would not even meet the 990.
Correct.
Right. So right now we have to have the 3 o'clock hard start. I mean, a hard stop, because right now, so that would put us at the 1,000 hours and with an hour additional. Okay. So I agree also with, when Catherine says, we're looking at what's best for students, but I also have to say that if we don't have bus drivers, then we can't get our kids to school. And so that's an issue for me as I listen to Joelle ask some of those questions, and it's been long-standing questions that we've had as a board of, do we need to pay our bus drivers more? Can we afford to provide more contracts? And so my question, Kelly, is out of those, is it 68 bus drivers? How many of those are hourly and how many of those are contracted?
We currently have 70% is the agreement to have 70% of our drivers that are on routes, AM, PM routes, to have contracts. So right now we have 55 contracted drivers, 11, we could do more, but 11 or more non-contracted drivers. So
Okay.
55 is the amount of contracted drivers.
Okay. So if we were able, Alan, to look at providing even 10 more contracts for bus drivers, so that could put us at least 65. Is that like just too much out of our realm financially to be able to do that? Or is that something that we could also not necessarily be connected to this conversation about late start? Because I see that as two different things. But at the same time, I'm also hearing Kelly, say we have to have bus drivers, in order to get kids to and from. You're muted. There you go. There.
You can't hear out of my head. So that's definitely something we would want to cost out, because you add the cost. The biggest cost is retirement insurance when you add a contract. But if we can't physically hire enough drivers, then we do have to look at what are our options to get those kids transported. You have two options: you raise the rate or you add more contracts. Sounds like those are what the options would be. So I think those are things we look at and cost those out.
I know that, and I really appreciated Holly talking about the UTA passes and as well, Nate. I know in the past that has been an issue about the cost of those passes for us. And as Kelly said, it's cheap, it's less expensive for us to bus kids on the other side of Redwood Road versus, having that pass. So that could be all a part of that conversation. I think that, it's just a part of that domino of changing the time. And then what does that domino effect look like? So as a board, I think that it might not be the conversation we have right at this moment about trying to figure out for next fall how we provide more stability and continuity with our bus drivers, but it needs to be a conversation at some point. So Nate and Melissa, maybe that's something that we could get, some information from Alan about those costs, what that would look like, for us, and if we'd be able to afford that or not, at least to provide some stability so that Cynthia isn't trying to find drivers in the office to drive buses in the mornings. And
I advocate that for subs too.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. There you go. That is exactly right.
I did just email you all the spreadsheet that I had up, and so you can look at that. And again, Kelly and his team did a great job putting that together.
One thing I wanted to add is more from Melissa's comment about how do you navigate as a parent. What my family did is we know our neighbors, and if neighbors' kids are going the same time, carpooling is a good initiative the city wants to do and the state wants to do anyways. Carpooling is an important thing, but that's just based on community relationships that people have to do. But I think this family school collaboration could maybe help have initiatives on how to build relationships through community and do carpooling, because that is something that is real, and when we did it with our neighbors, it helped. So the middle school kids with this neighbor, and then the high school kids or the elementary school kids. So like we did that, but because we know our neighbors, but not everybody knows that, especially when it comes to different languages or cultural differences. But our family community resource thing could be helping the community build those relationships. So carpooling could be a little bit more culturally acceptable and accessible if it goes to that. But we don't want to push the responsibilities on the families. But it is an option with some of those time conflicting things that Melissa was bringing up.
No, I really like what Jeremy came up with earlier, which is an express UTA, which is like express bus, which is fantastic. Because the reason I'm saying this, because I see it working when I was working at the VA, and and it's a bus from A to Z. It gets you to that point, and it's fast. That's one. And the other thing too, because I mean, it is a very challenging part, because we want to make sure we are fair to everyone, from teachers to bus drivers to staff, But as we all go back to always the source of everything that we are doing here is we are doing everything for students. One question I have, I don't know if this has been entertained and what is the cost of this, which is shared UTA drive type thing. So when I was at the VA, so they had like UTA gave or provided to the VA vehicles, like minivans or so. And one person, you know, will be the main driver and will be able to pick up several employees and bring them to work. And I don't know if that's something, because I'm just visualizing that with families, if there is like a designated 2 drivers and there is a vehicle provided by UTA, just imagine how much money that'll save, you know, to our busing system, which is 2 drivers, and they will be like, you know, responsible for a certain area and to get students from those and, you know, and back. So that's, I don't know if that's something that's been entertained or not.
I will speak to that just for a second. You can look through all the national studies and surveys. The school bus is actually your safest mode of transportation out there. Our goal is to get them out of the cars if possible and into school buses, because statistically, nationwide, the safest way to transport your student to school is in a yellow bus. I could talk a lot on this. I'll just shut up there, but just please understand, we're looking at the student safety first on this. And I think your yellow school bus is your safest mode of transportation.
Just out of curiosity, we would love if you have any information about those studies in terms of like the safety aspect of it. If you can get it to our way, that would be fantastic.
Be happy to.
Thank you so much. Yeah, because that would be great to have something in front of us that will help us, you know, be more cognizant in our decisions. Appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly.
Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm just looking at the schedules now. Thank you so much for Jeremy for setting them. And Kelly, I just have a couple questions. So I'm looking at some of the choices. Is there any reason you chose specific elementary schools? Because, for example, I'm looking at 2-tier balanced, and there's some schools that are starting, they're gaining 45 minutes, and some schools that are losing 45 minutes that are pretty close together. And I'm wondering,
the balanced one, the balanced.
I'm looking right now at 2-tier balance.
Yes.
And so I'm looking, for example, at Benyon. Let me see. So Benyon is adding 35 minutes, but Wasatch is losing, just as an example, 30 minutes. Those schools are so close to each other. You would have fewer changes if you swap the schools. So I'm wondering why some of those changes were and I'm sure there are examples on other pages too, but there's actually also Wasatch and Jackson that also are flipped that way. And those schools are really close to each other.
Sorry, first priority was trying to match up as close as we could to the current schedule of what they're doing and what the changes we made this year. We were looking at, there's maybe some things on here that we could flop and switch as you're bringing up. What we're looking at, are they special need buses or the regular ed buses, and trying to match those up. If you have a school, for example, say Emerson, they have 6 special ed students or buses and 4 regular ed buses, your ELP buses. That would be more difficult to change them than it would to change one that just has all special needs students.
Right.
So we're looking for buses that match 1-for-1 to try to even out. If you go to the very bottom of the sheet, you can go play with this. That's the beautiful part about this. You can play with it, change it from an A to a B to an A, and see what the results are down below. This worksheet will calculate for you.
Okay, so that's great. I see 2 sets of very close schools that have sort of the reverse time, and it would be interesting to me to know if we could and that would eliminate on this particular schedule, the 2-tier balanced, that would eliminate 4 yellow blocks. It would cut our yellow blocks in half.
And you can go ahead and make that change and see what happens. That's the beautiful part about this.
Okay, great. I will do
software.
that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Melissa, I'm thinking that the question that Jeremy asked us earlier is something that I would probably like us to continue to talk about. And that is, do we now say that we're not going to allow schools that don't have bus routes to choose a time based on, and I thought that Cynthia's examples were such great examples, you know, that it's not something that could happen, but has happened. And for us to now define the school day, because that's basically what we'd be doing, is a conversation that I think we would need to have further before making, you know, that decision and get some input because as Jeremy said, you know, that the shared governance process has been used to a certain extent. Some schools don't get that choice. They have to start and end because that's what their routes or their buses determine, you know, for them. But I think it's a really good question, and I appreciated how you posed that to us, Jeremy, of what that next step would be. So I don't see how we would be able to make a decision right, you know, obviously we're not today
now.
because it's a report, but you know, that has to be a part of the discussion in a broader base. And so because of that, here's my question, Jeremy and Kelly, and to the committee. How soon do we need to make a decision in order to implement this for the fall?
I think we have time on this in terms of, you know, what's different about this is it really is not going to impact anyone's schedule much based on what they're doing this year right now. If anything, it would just be a matter of changing up bell schedules if needed to. But I don't think this would be anything that would, I mean, obviously the sooner we know, the better, right? But there's not a hard timeline. For example, the other one that had been presented, we needed to get more of an answer because that was going to impact master schedule and things like that. None of this will do that. And so I think there's some leeway in terms of when that decision can be made.
That could be made. So we would have time for outreach and to be able to gather in some information and talk with school support and get some feedback, you know, as to especially, and is it 10 schools? Is it 10 schools that we have that don't have routes? I mean, that don't have buses?
It might be just a little bit higher than that, actually. I don't have it in front of me.
Looks like Kelly's
I'm
counting.
seeing 10, and then if you include Horizonte, 11.
Okay.
But
So 10 and Horizonte makes 11. Okay.
So we're just about at the end of our hour, and Christy is getting to exactly where I wanted to be. What are some questions that you have from the committee that the board needs to give direction on and timeline for that? So, I mean, I can see as Christy's already asked, how soon do we need to make a decision? I would say, do you want us to weigh in on options that you've presented, Jeremy? Also, this idea about, you know, schools that don't have buses and how we want that to look. I would like to hear from the committee what other things you need direction on from the board so that we can move toward taking next steps. I want to remind the board that there was a decision made last March to implement late starts for high school this fall. So we're working in that time frame, and what I'm looking for is not direction in this study session, but some ideas of what we need to be thinking about so that when we have it on an agenda to give direction, we're prepared to do that. Does that make sense? So committee, if you want to, and Jeremy, let us know. And maybe because we're at 6 o'clock, you could send some of those guiding questions to the board for us to be thinking about. And we'll have this on a soon upcoming agenda. Does that seem like a good plan, board members, for coming out of this study session? Okay. All right. Thank you to committee members for being here. Jeremy Chatterton, thank you for leading this committee. Thank you to Kelly and to Cynthia, to Sudam, thank you for being here. And Melanie, we appreciate all of you and the work that you're doing to support this conversation. I think it's a good and healthy one as we try and focus on what's best for our students and how to do that in the most effective way. I really appreciate you taking on something so large at a time when you have lots of other things on your plate. So thanks for spending an hour with us.
Of course, thank you.
Well, take care.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Thank you, board members, for engaging in that. We now have, I'd like to entertain a motion for the board to convene a closed executive session for the purpose of discussing character and professional competence of an individual.
President Ford, I'm happy to make that motion. I move that we enter a closed executive session on this day, Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021 at 6:01 p.m. for the purpose of discussing character and competence of an individual, negotiations, and or property.
Do I have a second? Okay. That's motion made by Nate and seconded by Mohammed. Let's go ahead and vote.
Arjuela, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, that motion carries. We'll now go ahead and stop the live stream. We will be back for the business portion of the meeting at 6.
Okay, it's live from here, and I'll let Sam know. We're live right now. I'm just checking with, let me just check. I'm checking with Sam to see if we need to do anything again.
Okay. All right. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. Give us just a minute to get the YouTube channel up and streaming.
I'm sorry, Amanda, I let you in early. I'm gonna put you back out into the waiting room.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I'm gonna put you back in the waiting room. I accidentally clicked on your name. I was letting in some other folks. We'll be just a few minutes.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, and we're streaming on Zoom. Are we up on YouTube yet?
Sam's coming in right now. We can ask him.
Okay.
Oh, here's Dottie. Okay, Sam, are we good?
Yes, you're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to everybody who's participating in this February 23rd meeting of the Salt Lake City District Board of Education. It is 6:32. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome all of our board members, including our student board member, Dottie Uman, as well as our superintendent and business administrator and those district employees that have been invited to participate in the meeting. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here. We'd also like to recognize and welcome our association representatives. That would be Nicole Palmer with SLASA, James Tobler with SLEA, B. Alonzo from Child Nutrition, Ben Rowley with Transportation, Che Olson with Buildings and Grounds, and Steve Russo from SLEOPA with Cindy Mills as the board representative. Thank you all for joining us and participating in our meeting tonight. I'd like to take a minute and have you stand and join me in repeating the Pledge of Allegiance. Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everyone, for that. Now we will move on to an exciting portion of our agenda, which is the decision and announcement of our new superintendent. We have had the opportunity as a board of going through an extensive process with community engagement, with participation from the board, with the consultation of Ray and Associates to select a superintendent who will lead our district beginning in July of 2021 and into the future. I want to thank our community for their participation in the process all the way through. We had community participation as we put together the job posting to know what qualities we were looking for in a superintendent. We had community participation as we were screening applicants to know what we should be looking for as we screened applicants and what we were seeking in a new leader of our district. And we had 3 pretty intensive days last week of participation from the board and community, district, stakeholders. I want to thank everybody who participated. I want to especially thank the board. It's been a large commitment, and I really value the way you've honored that commitment and taken this job very seriously. And I want to thank our superintendent and business administrator for their engagement last week in showing the candidates around the district. It was a fun opportunity to show off what great things we have going on here in Salt Lake, and I appreciate their efforts. Also, a huge thank you to Sam Quantz, who made a lot of it possible as we worked to make things virtual, provide access for people to provide input. So thank you to everybody through this process. This is an exciting time for our district, and I'm honored for it. What I'd like to do is now take a motion so that the board can make a decision on who we'd like to appoint as our next superintendent.
President Ford, I'd be happy to make that motion. I move that we appoint Dr. Timothy Gadsden III to a 2-year term as Salt Lake City School District Superintendent pending contract negotiations.
Thanks, Nate.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to appoint Dr. Timothy Gadsden as our Salt Lake City School District Superintendent to begin a contract of 2 years beginning July 1st, 2021. Do you have any discussion to that motion?
President Ford, I'll just go ahead and start us off. I just want to thank you for your kind words about the process, and thank you for our community, to all of our district stakeholders internally, as well as our stakeholders in the community. This was not an easy decision. We had 3 very strong candidates as finalists. We also had a very strong pool of candidates before that as well. And so I just we want to congratulate this board. I want to congratulate Dr. Gadsden for all of his efforts and the impression that he made, not only on this school board, but also on our community, both inside of our district and externally in our community through stakeholder opportunities. We really feel like he has what it takes relative to the direction that this board would like to move forward in, relative to outcomes for students, relative to boundaries and guide rails that the school district and school board would like to see moving forward, so that our community, that our students and our families and our teachers, our administrators, and all of our employees have a very strong and consistent leadership opportunity in working with Dr. Gadsden. So I just want to thank everybody, and also thank our candidates who participated in our interviews last week, Dr. Bryant and Dr. Wendy Gonzalez, and just congratulate our community and our school district.
All right. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Well, families, students, teachers, staff, It's been like an amazing, amazing journey. What an honor, first of all, to be involved in such a big decision. It was not an easy one, but it was really a decision that shows that our board is coming together as one body. All of us work tirelessly in making sure whoever is going to come next is going to be a person who's going to actually lead us into great things in the future. And so Dr. Gadsden has left a touch not only on me, but also on every board member here, including also families that I received emails from. And we had 3 amazing candidates, and one of them was able to represent those 2 amazing qualities the other 2 candidates have, in addition to the quality of Dr. Gadsden. So that's what we looked for. And, could not be any happier. And as we were making decisions, we were thinking about students, teachers, families, and our school staff. And we have seen that, when we made a decision to select Dr. Gadsden. And can't wait. Looking forward to a brighter future.
Thank you, Mohammed. We need to take a vote on the motion that's on the table, unless there's other comments. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm also really excited about the possibilities that Dr. Gadsden made, and really appreciate how well he aligns, and all of our candidates, but particularly Dr. Gadsden aligns with what we expressed as community and board goals. And I also want to take this moment to thank our interim superintendent, who I think has done a great job, stepped in while we needed him, and done a great job, and don't want to forget the work that he's done for us as well.
Thank you for those sentiments, Catherine. That's meaningful, and I will echo them. I would like to go ahead and take a vote on the motion on the table, which is that as a school board, we appoint Dr. Timothy Gadsden to be our superintendent with a 2-year contract beginning July 1, 2021.
Yeah, Huele, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Congratulations to Dr. Gadsden. We're looking forward to having you be part of our team.
Melissa, before we go to the next, I think that just to let our community know that we will be working on a transition period. You know that Dr. Gadsden will be back and forth into Salt Lake working with Superintendent Madden, and that we look forward to having that transition time with him also.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for going right to those next steps. We will now work on negotiating a contract with Dr. Gadsden that will include a transition period as well. Thank you. Thank you to, again, just thank you to everyone involved in the process, and including and especially our community for your support and engagement in the process. Now let's go ahead and move to our consent agenda, which consists of the purchasing and accounting reports. Can I take a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I can do that. I move that we accept the consent agenda that has the purchasing and accounting reports.
Do I have a second? Christy's made the motion. Mohammed seconded. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, let's vote on the consent agenda.
Yeah, Huele, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, that motion carries. Now let's go ahead and move to the request to speak portion of our meeting. I just want to remind everybody who has come to speak to us that we really value your feedback and the things that you have to tell us. It's important that we hear from you. I just want to remind you that we can't take comments that are specific to personnel, and that we also will not be able to discuss with you at this time. I may choose to direct you to the person who's going to be able to answer your questions. But right for now, we have 3 minutes for each person who would like to speak to the board. Superintendent Madden will allow you into the room to speak to us, and I will keep time. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. The first speaker is Amanda Longwell. Amanda, you can go ahead. Amanda, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Amanda?
Sorry. Amanda, you're in the room and we're ready for you to address the board. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
I don't know if I have a lag on what you're presenting versus now, so I apologize for the delay.
There is a lag. Thank you. Go ahead.
So for a lot of you know me already. For those of you who don't, I have 3 children in the district. One's middle school, 2 elementary. My youngest was born with Down syndrome. A lot of my focus is special education because we have a lot of voices for the gen ed group. And the special education conversation takes a lot of energy, especially whenever the equity conversation is generally geared to all of our other students in our very diverse city, which I love. But we need to specifically have these pointed special education conversations. So really quickly, thank you to Cynthia Morley and Jeremy and Christy and others for specifically bringing those points up during that late start conversation. I have no issue with the rearrangement of the start times in regard to late start. That's not why I'm here, but I do want to ensure that we're not creating potentially discriminatory situations and also seclusionary ramifications. And these plans that we're going over, they're all not adding in a start time change for those that aren't currently receiving busing. I assume it's just easier for busing to look at it that way. I hope that that's not the direction we're going. I'll push very hard against that because the future busing needs, we don't know. It was already discussed. And if somebody all of a sudden pops into a school that does not have currently busing and they were retaining self-governance, the ramifications to that family could be pretty bad and a lot of effort and would need to go into straightening that out and some potentially huge liabilities for the district. I would say yes to routes that require less drivers due to those driver shortages. We also typically on special education buses have aides, but there have been, from my understanding, aid shortages as well. There's that compensation issue that plays over on both sides, but without those aides, we in our own district, I'm aware of a young little lad that was beaten up on a bus, and he's a student with a disability, and he was just let off to his parents, and the driver bus drove off. I don't know where that went. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Alpine School District situation where the bus driver physically abused a student with a complex disability by having the turnover and not being able to retain these drivers to have meaningful education for these drivers, for these aides and proper staffing. We run into a lot of concerns and liabilities there. So the more we look at ways that we can ensure that we can properly staff our buses, it's beneficial for our district and us. The extreme times, I know there's been case law in regard to really extreme times for students with disabilities when you have somebody with a complex disability that's medically
Amanda,
fragile,
I
toileting
hate
needs,
to
feeding needs,
interrupt you.
etc. It can be torturous to be on the bus for that length of time. So I would propose to really look at that and the compensation for
Thank
aides
you.
too. Sorry.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
sharing that with us. Thank you, and thanks for your advocacy, Superintendent.
Okay, next speaker is Ashley Anderson.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear us,
Welcome,
Ashley?
You've
I
got
can hear you.
You
Okay.
have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm grateful to hear that Dr. Gadsden was just announced as the new superintendent, not least of all because he was the only candidate interviewed who noted that returning to school buildings can be a source of trauma for students. I'm really looking forward to his leadership. I'm here today because with less than 3 days warning, I learned from a fellow parent that the model of my children's instruction will be radically shifting on Monday. They will be pulled from their remote classroom where they are thriving and moved to an expanded classroom. This change was not communicated openly, but was instead communicated via email to some parents. With the emphasis of superintendent candidates and board members on choice, I want to be clear that parents have never been polled on the choice of expanded classrooms, nor have participants, including teachers, been surveyed about their efficacy. To Dr. Gadsden's point, it can cause distress for children with high medical risk to stream into their classroom and know they can't fully participate. If a board goal continues to be SEL, this practice should end. One of my children was told by a classmate earlier that, quote, all you idiots can stay remote if you want, end quote. What his peer does not know is that my child was born with a tumor, which is most likely to recur in the lungs and which can be triggered by factors including disease. I should not be required as a mother to explain this to you, nor should I have to tell him about the decision for expanded classrooms with less than 3 days before his experience is upended. At the end of the day, it really seems that everyone gets their choice except for those of us who were taking what was on offer. My younger son has been joyfully participating in weekly outdoor groups, his first in-person connection with classmates since March 2020. If there is a change next week, he will no longer have this option. In fact, all outdoor classrooms in fall 2020 will be discounted in a fully expanded model. In July, network directors reported to you that we should not make changes in crisis response, but need predictable pathways for students. Changing the schedule with less than 2 weeks after a prior change with no parent notice doesn't meet this criteria. In the fall, network directors reported to the board that expanded classrooms are a teacher's choice and that principals have the responsibility to work with their community if teachers choose that model. In my community, SCC unanimously discouraged expanded classrooms that were not self-selected. SIC made a statement just last week that expanded classrooms are currently being treated as school a la carte. How have we gone from this to private decision-making, which excludes medically vulnerable families, which excludes my family? Thank you for considering this perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Okay. Next speaker is Yuri Uden.
Okay, welcome, Yuri. You've got 3 minutes to address the board. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening to everybody. Can you hear?
Yes. Go ahead.
Can you?
Yes,
yeah,
we can hear. You've
yeah.
got 3 minutes. Thank you, Yuri.
Okay. Thank you. I want. Oh, yeah. Okay. Some disruption here. I wanted to thank you to all board members for your continuous service to our multicultural community, and I wanted to be as well supportive. for constructive argument within every board member, that every board member cares for their constituent, because naturally every board member I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, it's some kind of disruption here. I can hear myself, and
You probably need to turn off the YouTube video because
okay,
of the lag. Turn it
okay,
off and then just speak
okay.
to us directly. Thank you. You have just about a minute left.
Okay, because every board member represents specific demographic within the district, and very naturally there's some differences in opinions. As a teacher, I'm very well aware that some students on the west side share single computer between family members, and some of them do not have even internet, which makes online learning very almost impossible. And I think it was very constructive that Salt Lake School District moved to face-to-face learning. I signed for public comments for several reasons. Recently, I discovered that the district policy does not stipulate how many individuals should be on the hiring committee, which makes the hiring process very biased. Usually, I made some research in different districts nationwide. Usually on the hiring committee, between 5 and 7 individuals. Often in Salt Lake School District, only 2 individuals, a principal and vice principal. As well, I would like to address P3 policy about nepotism
Mr. Uden,
yes.
That's 3 minutes. Thank you for coming and addressing the board and sharing some of your thoughts and concerns with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
That's all the requests to speak?
We just had 3 today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, board members, and thank you to those who came to address the board. We will now move to the report section of our agenda, which will begin with a COVID-19 report. Superintendent, I'll turn it over.
Okay, and I've got a few people here to help me, so we'll kind of swap in and out. I think the first thing that I wanted to address, though, was the health department meeting that you and I were in this morning, President Ford, and things are moving in a pretty positive direction. The director from the health department said we could even possibly move into moderate level of transmission by next week. I would note that all of our zip codes in Salt Lake City School District over the last 2 weeks are below 10 on the positivity rate, and they range from about 3 to about 9.7. And I know they can change certainly in a day's time, but those are pretty positive indicators, as well as numbers have been going down for all age groups. The first thing I think we're going to update you on is on vaccinations, and I'd actually like to turn the time over to Mindy Holmdahl to talk to you about that. But before I turn the time over to her, I just really want to thank Mindy and her team and the nurses. They have done such a good job on this. They've worked super hard. Sam as well, in terms of getting people signed up. It's been a ton of work, and they've been relentless and made it run very smoothly. So Mindy, I'll turn it over to you for a minute if you want to give us a quick update.
Yes, thank you so much. I do want to reiterate what Larry mentioned. Our district nurses have just been amazing and attending all of these clinics, helping with test to start, test to stay, all of our vaccine clinics. So there to support employees who might be a little nervous or who might have had some sort of reaction. I think it's been really reassuring for them to see a person that they know and a medical professional that they know at these vaccine clinics. And also want to also extend our gratitude to Principal Chatterton and Principal Wright. for hosting these clinics. Each week it's been a huge task, and they have both supplied support staff in addition to our district nurses. There's been plenty of school staff who have helped and helped move people through the line. It really has been a team effort, and of course, we couldn't have done it without IT and all their help, and Sam and Jordan and the dashboards and all of the things that they're creating are just super helpful. And also to CNS, just this evening, the community nursing centers who have been providing all of the vaccines, they have just let us know that we're going to have some options for people who had missed some doses. So we're really appreciative of their flexibility and their support for our district as well. We've given over 2,500 first doses to employees. We have given more than 1,000 second doses. We have 4 more clinics to go to get all of those second doses. And then, of course, as everyone will have seen on the news, vaccines are becoming more available throughout the city at different pharmacies and locations. And then also Salt Lake Education Foundation is really also supporting the community and is working to hold vaccine clinics in Glendale and in Rose Park and really get our community members services where they've been going throughout this whole COVID time for other additional support. We're just appreciative for the opportunity to highlight everybody who's been part of this team and all of the district employees who've been so patient with the process. And we're really grateful for the number of people who have been vaccinated.
Great. Thanks, Mindy. The 2 clinics, the Glendale Clinic and the Rose Park Clinic that we're working on with the health department, those are not for our employees, not for our students. Those are for the community. And they just wanted some help to set those up in communities where it could make it easier for folks to get to the vaccine. So they'll be drive-through clinics, and that'll benefit all of us. So we're looking forward to that. The next thing I want to show you is we did share the dashboard with you at one point in time, but I'd like to go back to the dashboard just real quickly. For folks that have not been to the dashboard, I will show you how to get to it. So on the front page, when you scroll down, immediately the COVID-19 reporting is right there. We can click on that, and then it would be this case totals, and takes us to the page. Takes a second to load. And so these are our current cases for the past 14 days. And you can see that the vast majority of our schools, when I looked at this earlier today, we have 28 schools that do not have any cases. We have 8 schools with 1 active case, 2 schools with 2 active cases, and 2 schools with 3 active cases. The dashboard updates every morning at 7:00 a.m. So yesterday there were actually 5 cases at one of the schools, but this morning when I got on, 2 of those cases had passed the 14 days, and so they dropped off. So this is where we are right now. An active case means that they've been identified by the county as positive, and then that information comes back to us, and then we note it on the website. But that does not mean that they contracted COVID at schools. It means that they are participating in in-person learning and they tested positive. I don't know if there's any questions about the dashboard. Sam's here and can answer any sort of technical questions. When you go back to the previous page right before this, there's also a link out to the county dashboard as well.
Go ahead, Catherine. Catherine's got a question.
Okay.
So these numbers are reported to you via the Salt Lake County Department of Health?
Yes.
And then you cross-match them with who is enrolled in school?
Who is, yes, attending in person.
So you're getting the names of the students and then cross-referencing.
Right. And I believe the nurses are doing that. Mindy, is that correct? I believe.
And so
they are in constant communication with the health department so that any students who are reported are also followed up with by the health department, or the health department notifies us of those as well. And then we're also going to have some additional tech support, COVID-19 tech support, to just kind of help make sure that we have plenty of people supporting the schools with contact tracing in each of the networks.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, and does this include students that are just at school for a period, a day, if they're in high school, or do they need to be there the entire day?
No, I think Sam maybe can weigh in on that question, but my understanding is it's any student that attends in person at all.
Okay, good. And is that right, Sam?
That is correct. Yeah. So that could be they attend remotely and participate in extracurricular activities, but only those who aren't the only students that aren't counted are those who are remote only.
Okay, great. And then I just want to point out that the positivity rate changed. The way we calculate, Utah calculates the positivity rate, changed in early February. And according to the Salt Lake Tribune, they say that the new method is test over test, and that the new method allows us to have a lower, it makes our positivity rate lower.
Right.
So actually it looks like from what they're saying that it's probably in the old system about doubled. And if you look at most national reporting sites, Utah is still one of the worst places.
So in the meeting this morning with the health department, in the test over test, which is the new way, we were 5.7, which is quite a bit lower. And in the county, I believe it's about 11. We're lower. All of our zip codes are lower than in the county, but about 11 in the county and 5.7 with the new method of testing. He told us this morning.
Okay.
That's right. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? We're also starting to do, we just started last week, we took a swing at it and we'll keep working on it, but we're working with the HERO project to offer some PCR testing. We're trying to do it in 2 locations. We're trying to do it at West High and at Glendale, and then we'll rotate up to East and Highland. But when we do it at Glendale Middle School, that PCR testing is open to kids from Highland or East also if they would like to attend and do that. It's on Wednesdays, it's free, and not only is it free, but any student or teacher that goes and gets one of those tests gets a $10 gift card through the HERO project. So we're trying to encourage folks as much as possible to engage in that testing. I'd also just at this point like to just give a little shout out again to Missy and the work with the test to start that we did and preparations for test to stay. We've got lots of tests on hand and we're ready to go at any point when we need to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Becky Pittum for just a minute. Again, Becky's going to give a little update on elementary, and then we'll talk about middle and high schools a little bit more. Becky?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Just wanted to take a few minutes and give you an update on our elementary schools. I'd begin by saying that as of today, I finished gathering data from our schools, and it's about 70% of our elementary students are attending in person now. And our schools are being diligent about making sure that all students have the opportunity to attend in person, and that students are welcome following the directive that we've been given by the board to do that. So that's an ongoing process, and one that our principals are diligent about. In doing that, we also find that there are struggles and challenges. We know that there are students who wish that they could be attending in person and that it's hard for them to see their friends and playmates return to school in person. So our teachers are trying to be cognizant of that, working with SEL, social emotional learning. I know our principals are focusing on that in every single building, every elementary building, to try and help with those students and help with that struggle with all students. I know, for example, we have several schools that every morning the principal gets on and greets the children and does some kind of an SEL activity with them, some breathing exercises, just those warm welcomes that students need. Also wanted to just point out that our schools are focusing on our board goals, on getting that those SEL goals in, and in focusing now on literacy, and really trying to make the most of the time that we have. As far as challenges go, our number one challenge is substitutes right now. Well, this I would say number one, but it's close to the next one, getting the substitutes that we need. And our principals have been amazing at finding substitutes and juggling people and making it happen, but it is a struggle, and that is something that is ongoing and we're working on. Another struggle that we have is the expanded classrooms that have been developed and that are occurring as more and more families choose to send their students back to school. And these expanded classrooms, it's hard for our teachers, and yet they are doing the best they can. And we're so pleased with their work, so pleased with their efforts, and doing the best they can, not only just to deliver the curriculum in a rigorous way, the best that they can. Remember that they're teaching students that are in remote and in person, and they're learning that new mode. And also in doing so, learning to make sure that they're giving our remote students the same kind of attention that they need and meeting their needs as well. So that's just a brief update on the great things that are happening in elementary and some of the struggles. Thanks.
Thanks, Becky. Chris Jesselin's going to give a little update on middle schools.
Thank you. So I've got numbers from our middle schools, but I will say this: it is a moving target. So from day to day, depending on, I think anything from weather to who knows what the case might be, they've had a tough time having consistent counts over time. But if we look at it in the last week and a half or so, we've got about 65% of our middle schoolers attending school in person, about 35% that have remained remote. There are a number of things that I think are working really well for our middle schools right now. The 2-day schedule is working well because it makes social distancing much easier, especially at lunchtime, which tends to be the hardest time to get kids to spread out. They've seen far less in the way of behavior issues at school, which obviously allows people to focus on instruction and the work at hand. So that's been a positive. To a school, the reports are that students are taking the mitigation measures really seriously and have been really good about following the expectations that teachers and administrators have laid out for them. We've seen far less tardies at the middle school level. That's with removing, for most of our schools, the warning bell for kids. There's this notion that they've got to keep moving and get themselves to class, and that's actually helped quite a bit. We do have a number of spaces where there are teachers who are teaching just in person and teachers who are teaching just remote. I think, as you're probably all aware, when you've got one learning mode that you're dealing with, it's going to be better instruction. The expanded classroom has been hard, but I think that as teachers have started experimenting a little bit with just how to make that blended sort of model work, they are starting to see some more success. The biggest problem we're seeing right now at middle school is the same one that Becky mentioned. It's substitutes. The middle school teachers have stepped up to help cover each other's classes. They've been willing to take kids into their class. They've given up their prep to cover classes as need be. We've got administrators that are taking classes of students into the library and covering there. So again, they've been incredibly inventive about how to get things covered and taken care of. But to keep that sort of energy up for the remainder of the year is going to be tough. So the sub issue is certainly a big problem at the middle school level as well.
Thanks, Chris. Brian's going to talk about high schools.
Right. Thank you, school board members and current but soon to be out Superintendent Madden. First of all, we see 300 to 600 students attending in person per day, depending on the school day in our 3 traditional high schools. I'll talk more about those in just a little bit, those numbers. What we see working is that we have a very low number of positive COVID cases being found through testing, not only with staff, but students, and Superintendent Madden alluded to that earlier, that information and data earlier. This next one is I want to also say not just a big thank you to our staff at our high schools, but even a bigger thank you to the students, is students are complying with safety protocols overwhelmingly, doing with the masks. Rarely have I seen masks off. Seeing them, and when I see them down and students are redirected, students have been have been part of the solution. I'm very compliant with that. So a big thank you to them. With one half of the students up to one half of the students being in the high schools, lunch times and passing periods are not as overcrowded. So that's been a plus. The struggle has been number of in-person attendees each day is lower than expected. And that ties to the student choice that our high school students have. The student choice to attend in person or remotely. Each class period is at times making school feel too optional for students. The in-person attending feeling like that with some. That's a struggle that we're seeing right now in high school. And from the Department of Redundancy department, we have sub issues as well. The number of subs, the ability of those subs to really do a job that they haven't had to do in the past as subs, being more than just a classroom or group supervisor has been a challenge because of the online, expanded classroom model makes that difficult, but even bigger than that is just the number of subs that we have, which isn't near enough. That's all I have.
So I mean, what you're hearing here is that, the expanded model is really tricky. And one of I think the big issues we have is not having consistent numbers. And the expanded model is easy to roll in and out of with these fluctuating numbers. But what would really be helpful is if we had a little more consistency in who was in person and who was home. Then we could start to try to work on possibly some transitions, where we did talk at one point in time about how we wanted people to either be remote or in person, but the logistics of that are kind of wildly difficult given the fluctuating numbers. So we're going to keep looking at that, keep trying to improve as much as we can. I would say that given the test to start that we conducted, given the really, I think, very, very low numbers of cases that we have right now in schools, and kind of the optimistic forecast from the health department, that while today we're just reporting to you, I know we have another meeting next Tuesday, and I'd like to come back at that time and talk about the thought of expanding to 4 days a week. We do have some kind of landmarks coming along. I mean, we do have the start of fourth quarter, which begins April 5th, and given the particularly low numbers, particularly in the high school, where we were really concerned because we know that that can be a higher risk environment. We haven't seen that pan out, and we could certainly handle a lot more kids in the schools. When you go in now, they do feel fairly empty. So I'd like to come back next Tuesday, and maybe we can have a discussion and possibly even some action regarding 4 days a week. If there are any questions that any of you particularly have that you want to communicate to me in the meantime, information that you'd like included in that conversation, you can certainly send those to me at any time. There's another, was inclined to have that conversation anyway, as soon as the numbers were looking so good. But there's also something else happening kind of relative to that conversation on the side. And I'll actually let Yandri talk to you about that. Yandri, are you back on? Okay, well then I'll tell you briefly. There's a current bill, Senate Bill 107, that was passed out of the Senate yesterday with a 2/3 positive vote and sent to the House. And that bill actually would mandate 4 days of in-person instruction. That's how they would define in-person instruction, as a minimum of 4 days. And I don't know, that's why I kind of wanted Yadri to talk about it. I mean, I don't know what the speed of that will be, what will happen with that bill. But just so that everyone's aware, I mean, there certainly is the potential that that bill gets passed through the House, signed by the governor, and goes into effect. And so I think we need to be ready for that. We've talked to our secondary school administrators. I think probably the very fastest case scenario for that would possibly be the end of the first week of March, which could potentially require us to offer a 4-day-a-week option beginning March 8th. But I'm just speculating on that. I don't see that it could happen sooner than that. But I just want you to know that that's out there. It's actually, I think, to me, I feel like it's separate from the conversation that I'm asking to bring back next time. But it could just wipe that conversation out. And move us into a 4-day-a-week situation. That's all I had to offer right now for an update. Certainly, if anybody has any questions, we've got some good people here, and we'll do the best to answer them. I know that the sub issue, I think everyone understands, is a real big one, because we really need the subs to come in and actually do some things that we haven't asked subs to do in the past. We're asking them to get on Canvas, and certainly anybody out there that's listening that would be willing to sign up to be a sub. We'd love to get you trained up and get your help. We do deal, I think this year in particular, people are getting to see some of the things that we deal with even in a normal year. All of us that have been in schools as administrators have had days when we couldn't fill all of our subs, and we scramble and we do what we can to make it work. Maybe it's not perfect, but we do the best we can to get by, and people are really working super hard in the schools. They're doing a wonderful job. I know that it's not perfect. I know that some people have had experiences that have not been very good. But just know that the conversations are not stopping, and we'll do everything we can to try to improve the situation for every student in every class. So again, if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or we can pick this up again next week.
Thank you, Superintendent. We definitely will pick this up next week. What I'd like to do, board members, is give us an opportunity to go around and ask a couple questions, but keeping the timing in our mind, let's just give each board member about 2 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead, Hoeli, I'll start with you.
You said time, so I'm going to time myself. So let me put up my timer.
Hoeli's our timer. Thank you so much. Yeah,
I will model it. Okay, so I'm starting. I don't really have questions. I just wanted to share my experience, because I was there when Wes was starting. I was there those first 2 days helping out pass out masks, and I saw how the test to start happened and what it looked like, and it was really, really helpful for me to be there and see things. And everything you're saying makes sense to me, because I was there, and what you're saying, the classrooms look empty, stuff like that. Yeah, I think opening the option for people, because like you're saying, based on what we're seeing, yeah, I think in the future, the 4-day makes sense, and moving there, right? I think it just makes sense, but we just kind of have to see things. The other thing, in terms of subs, yes, that was the biggest thing I kept hearing a lot, and Jared, Dr. Wright has been proactive as much as possible to work on that, right? But just like I even posted on my Facebook today that what the district posted was like, we're looking for subs. I was like, I shared that on my Facebook. I'm like, we're looking for subs. So please really think about that. We need that. But all of what you're doing is amazing. During the superintendent search last week, I was at the elementary school, Meadowlark, and it was good to see there too what was happening in the person and people doing the extended classroom. And I used to teach too, and so I was like, I can't imagine that, and I really empathize, and they're doing their best. And I just, like the parent was talking earlier about how that's is a hard situation for teachers, but also parents and students. Yes, it is. I think that's why when we figure out how we can get those numbers to where they need to be, those extended classrooms could maybe just stop existing in certain ways, right? But we're not there yet. But we could be there in the future based on what and how we're doing stuff. But yeah, y'all are doing great. I'm super proud of how we're moving forward with some of these, with all of these different options and opportunities for our community and for our students. There.
You're muted,
Go ahead.
Melissa. Okay.
Yeah, she could hear me. Sorry. Go ahead, Jenny.
Sorry. Well, I do have a question on the substitutes that are needed. From your perspective, Superintendent Madden, is there anything that can hinder people to want to apply for substitute teacher position? Like, is there anything in our way that is causing this lack of, showing of wanting to apply?
Yeah, well, they have to apply. I mean, they do have to go through that process. There is a background check. And so we would need them to go through that normal process. But if anybody was in that process and they were struggling in any way, I think they should just reach out to us. I mean, we can help them. It can get a little cumbersome at times. I mean, it can get a little tricky, and certainly people could reach out. They could email us or call Human Resources, and we'll help them through it. What I don't want is someone to go in there and get frustrated and think, well, you know what, maybe I won't sub after all. We really need the help, and anybody from the community that wants to get in there and help us on this, we want to help them make it happen.
And we've done our due diligence in trying to advertise that widely around the city, around the county.
I'm not sure that we've particularly advertised it, but that's certainly that's a great idea. I mean, something to consider. I mean, we do need more people. Yeah. Moselle will talk in a minute, and I think she can address if there are any efforts that we've made in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you for this opportunity. I think we might have additional time because it looks to me like we have one more report, nothing on our discussion agenda, and only one thing on our action agenda because we don't have anything from the discussion agenda. So it seems like we might be able to take a few more minutes than two. So I guess I'd like to first of all thank former board member Sam Hansen for signing up to be a substitute and recruiting 2 other people. I know we need a lot more, but I really appreciate the fact that he's done that and wanted to recognize that he sees the need and he's doing it. And I appreciate that. I guess I'd like to ask the network directors how we are prioritizing remote learning, because that was something that we said was our top priority, to prioritize remote learning when we set up the plans and we adopted the plans.
Do one of you want to speak to that, or do you?
Sure.
Go ahead.
There's just, Brian, were you just about to jump in? I don't want to monopolize.
Go ahead, Becky, I'll follow up.
Okay. As far as prioritizing remote learning, in all of our classrooms, even our expanded classrooms, then we still have that remote learning happening with our Zoom accounts and with the teachers using Zoom. It's been an ongoing target based on as the year has progressed, based on our numbers. And so as you say, how are we prioritizing that remote learning? We are trying to balance that remote learning with the needs of in-person. It's all about balance. In the elementary level, again, I was saying 74% of our students are in person. And so while we are putting an emphasis on remote learning and on our remote learners, right? We have 74% of our students at the elementary level who are sitting before us in person. And so that's a balance. And so the remote learning absolutely is still a priority, but it's a balance that we are struggling with.
Sure. And I just would remind you that the plan did say specifically we're going to prioritize remote learning, and that if we were doing that better, maybe we wouldn't have those numbers. I also think that it's hard to judge by those numbers because that partly reflects whether students wanted to go back to their teachers. So when we say that 74%, that's that number is distorted by the students that wanted to stay with their teachers. And we've never actually seen those numbers, unfortunately, how it would have been otherwise. So I guess I just would, ask you again that the plan the board voted on was to prioritize remote learning. And I guess I'm seeing that not happening as much, unless Brian or Chris wants to add something in.
Sure, I would love to add in there, Board Member Kennedy. We have had the priority on remote learning all started with our dedication to using Canvas, and that has continued. That started early. Teachers have been trained in Canvas. Certainly some teachers use it better than others, but a big piece of what our coaches have done when they've gone to classrooms, administrators have also been helpful in this, is to help teachers learn how to continue to incorporate pieces of better use of Canvas in those classrooms. Like I said, coaches have been part of helping that out as well. And we've gone so far as in one of our departments through teaching and learning to make really explicit how-to videos that were unique to provide a how-to site, not make the videos, but provide the how-to site with some real clear, easy steps for teachers to follow in doing their remote learning, and also and also with students now coming back into school, how to help them in school while still meeting the needs of remote learners. For high school, it's only been a couple weeks. We're not as good at it as we're going to be in another 2 weeks or another 2 weeks after that. And it is high maintenance. It's something that we're trying to work through this COVID moment. We think we have some pieces in place that we're building for the start of the school year next year that'll allow remote learners to have even a better platform and be able to use that better. So it's getting better as time goes on. It's far from perfect, but there has been organized professional learning and a focus on that, as well as when our principals go into classrooms and see what's happening in those classrooms as well. I think 2 weeks from now will look better than it does now, and we'll just keep going in that direction.
Right. And just to clarify, all of our students are using Canvas pretty much at the high school level, isn't that right? So that's important for all students. And again, I just ask the network directors, how are we prioritizing remote learning, which was a component of Superintendent Madden's plan, just to continue to think about that. Another question I have is, how is our technology working at the different sites? Are we having things drop off? I heard that we did a couple training sessions where they did the videos focused on Google Classrooms and devices that we actually don't have, and that they looked wonderful to use, but we don't actually have them. So are our training things relevant?
I'm not sure if one of the network directors or Sam wants to speak to that. I haven't heard of a particular problem.
I haven't heard of dropping off issues, but certainly could be a possibility, but it's not something that principals have reached out to me about. I do know that some of the video clips in particular that were shared were intended to sort of serve as a model, not necessarily via the technology that was in front of them, but more structurally speaking for that instruction. I have not looked at all of them myself. So there may be some out there that, like you said, have a device that is not accessible to our kids. I think the biggest thing that I've seen in terms of efforts to continue to prioritize that online learning is we have schools that have specifically focused energy on continuing to provide or teach teachers engagement strategies to use in this digital space. I think the novelty of online learning wears off pretty quick, and it's something that adept teachers figure out very quickly that they've got to move from mode to mode, or from program to program, or structure to structure. So I think as they've gotten more adept at that, the transition at the secondary level, I think, can be a little easier in that regard, in terms of continuing to support remote students while having students in front of you. But I think with any sort of new sort of wall in front of you as a teacher. You got to figure out your way up and over it or around it. And any of those have taken us some time. And I do know one of the frustrations out there has been that change keeps happening, right? I mean, to think that we've not had more than a few months in any one sort of solid space, I think has been hard. But we've got teachers who've stepped up, and I think they'll continue to step up. And we can certainly continue to make the effort to push on principals to prioritize those remote kids, especially as those numbers shrink, because I can completely see how it can be easy to forget the few, right? Which we can't do and we won't do. So we'll keep leaning on them in that regard for sure.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I would love to see a report from teachers and principals in your next report, Superintendent Madden, about how well technology is working and if we're having any technology gaps because of a lot of people on the system. So that'd be great if we could get that in your next report. My last question is just that I just want to clarify. So our 4-day return might be pushed by the legislature, is what you're saying. Yes. And it could happen in less than 2 weeks. Is that correct?
I think that's possible. Yandri's here now, and maybe Yandri, do you want to speak to that a little bit? I mean, we did talk about Senate Bill 107, and I really don't know. You can maybe speak better than I can about what's realistic timeline-wise.
Yeah. Sorry, we did media with Dr. Gatson. He did great. So I apologize. I missed the discussion earlier. Superintendent, are you asking me to give a broader overview about SB 107?
Maybe just what do you see as a potential timeline? I mean, and I know it's a range, right? But like, what's the fastest this could happen if it did happen, and what might we guess?
Sure. So again, it does depend. The bill passed out of the Senate with 2/3 support, and if it passes out of the House with 2/3 support, then the bill will go into effect as soon as the governor signs that bill. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean the governor will sign it on the first day of bill signing, but we could see a signature as early as next Friday on the last day of the session. Beyond that, it might be another week or two, but it's still a pretty short timeline for either option.
Thanks for that information, Yandri, and thanks for all your responses. I appreciate them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. You actually spoke for exactly 2 minutes, and we took extra time for hearing answers, which I really appreciate. So thank you for that. Nate, did you have something you'd like to add?
Not particularly. I just, I think a lot of the thoughts that have been on my mind have already been asked by board members. So I just want to thank everybody for the conversation and for all your hard work, all the sacrifices that you're making, to make all of this possible. I'll just defer the rest of my time to my board colleagues.
Thank you, Nate. Mohammed?
Thank you, Nate, for allowing us that extra time. Much needed. All right. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to every parent and their patients as we work things, in the right direction. And I want also to thank the teachers as they are working tirelessly in balancing between online and in person, and for sacrificing your time as well to be there for future of our country. Those are the leaders that we're going to rely on one day, and they'll be out there, in the Capitol, and hopefully they're not going to be pressuring us in some ways to pass certain things the way they want to. But what I'm saying basically is thank you, thank you, thank you. Words are not enough to express that. And to the students who are back in the class, I encourage you, kudos to you. I salute you. You guys are doing awesome. My little boy just went back yesterday. Yep. And he was very happy to be back in person. Good for him to see his friends. It is still an adjustment, and we are very, very happy with that. And so I have a question before I continue with some comments. This is in regards to substitute teachers. What are we offering to the subs to make the offer for them to come and be in our schools enticing and rewarding besides just the pay?
Just a real quick thing. Nate's 2 minutes passed, so now you have 2 minutes, but not the people only when you're talking.
Yes.
Thanks, Holly. I appreciate it. Between the two of us, we're keeping track. We're going to keep you honest, Mohammed.
Thank
you. So who wants
you.
to answer the question about what are we doing to make the substitute job enticing besides pay? We did increase, I will note that the board voted to increase sub pay really quite substantially last year, which is a great thing. But Superintendent, who do you want to have?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just say that, on a good year, on a regular year, we've had a hard time with substitutes over time, and not to this degree, but it's very difficult work. And we're asking them to have some other skills right now, but I'll let Moselle speak to this.
Would you like me to do that right now?
She can do it now, but she's going to talk about human resources stuff in just a minute. If you want to include the sub stuff, then we can do that as well.
So Mohammed, are you okay deferring that? She's planning to talk about that in the next report. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And if
Thank you.
In that report, if we can have an answer whether the subs will have the ability to get some vaccination,
I think we can answer that.
Okay.
And so, and maybe, I don't know if Mindy is still on. Mindy, do you want to talk about if she's about the availability of vaccines? Like if we hire subs now, we've kind of gone past our first doses. We do not have access to doses. So folks would then have to go through the Salt Lake County Health Department. And that's my understanding is we wouldn't have any control over that. Mindy, is that accurate?
That's correct. They're only offering booster doses at this point, not first doses. They
I wish we
may
could use
offer
that.
a first dose clinic at some point. There's been talk of it, but nothing that no dates, no times have come up yet. But if that does change, because things do change all the time, we would definitely send out that information. But right now, Yandri has been pulling together links to different pharmacies that she's tried and tested and knows that they can select that they're a educator and that they can get a priority status at places like Smith's and CVS and other local pharmacies.
That's where it stands right now. But this is the depth of this thing is new to the health department. It's new to community nursing services, and I will say that they've tried to be as flexible and helpful as they can be.
Okay, thank you for letting me know about that. It just it appears like it is a concern across the board for all the grade levels, and those substitute teachers are going to be there in front of our students, and they deserve just something to think about. Hopefully, there is some way we can make that happen for them. Well, how am I? Good on time, fantastic. All right, so. Every single member here in the board and everyone that is sitting here today, we always have put our students and teachers in front of us. For every decision we make it for the purpose of making sure that our schools are moving in the right direction, that our kids are learning well, and that our environment is safe. Now, the Bill 107, it is, I don't know how to even put that into words. We all are working very hard over here to make sure that we do the right thing. Some of us are losing sleep trying to make sure that we are doing the right thing. And unfortunately, such bills, when they are being pushed to force us into moving in a certain direction, it actually does not help us unite. It does not help our communities. We are elected families here, elected by communities. They trusted us. They put us here because they see something that we can bring to the table. And to the legislators, I know you're doing your best, but right now, I beg of you that you let us do our jobs as well. That's what we are here for, to take care of our students and our teachers. I know there are so many other things. Help us with the busing, help us with the funding, help us with taking care of our schools. Those are the things that really we are needing here at this point. But we know that we're all working here. We all have just great benefits. We all thinking about our students. We are not sitting here and just like think, oh, okay, what can I do tomorrow to stop the kids from going back to school? That is not what we are doing. Everything we are doing, again, we are doing it because we are parents. Some of us are grandparents. Some of us are students. Some of us have family who are teachers. So it is a balancing act. And I just hope that from this talk here today, if legislators are listening, I personally, as a father, and as a servant in this community, and as a veteran, I beg of you that you just trust us. We will do our job. I really beg of you that you'll do that. And Governor Cox, if you're watching right now, please hold on to that bill until like at least April. Well, you know what I'm going. I'm just like, my heart is in this because I want our kids to have a great education. I want to make sure the future generations are ready to continue building on the American dreams. Thank you.
Thanks for your passionate words, Mohammed. I'm going to just take a couple seconds, probably, hopefully not very long, and thank everybody for this presentation. I do think it's extremely important that we value and prioritize a remote learning experience so that those students are having the highest quality education that they deserve. Every student in this district deserves that. I also want to make sure our priority is on the in-person learning option for students as well. And I feel like perhaps because of the difficulty with substitute teachers and some of just the way it's set up, I think that in-person option has been just a little left something to be desired, honestly, especially in our secondary schools. And I do want to make sure that we're providing the highest quality education to every student based on the mode of learning that's going to work best for them. And so I really encourage those of you who've presented to us today to just continue that work. I know you're really working on that, and I really want to see that be an emphasis, that option to be in the building is not just an option to be in the building, but it's an actual in-person learning engagement opportunity for education for the students who really need that. And so that would be my encouragement on that. And then I will kind of echo what the superintendent said and send to you kind of the health order from the governor's office that came out last night that does review the numbers in terms of how to do test to stay. And I think there's some really good guidelines there so that we should definitely follow. And I really do hope we're moving toward a 4-day-a-week option and discussing that next week, because I think that that will help alleviate some of the pressure that we've been talking about tonight. And thank you, Superintendent, for the time and effort that you put into this report, and to Brian, Becky, and Chris. Really value the work you're doing. Thank you. Christy?
Thank you, Melissa. So Brian, Becky, and Chris, I just want to make sure that you really do hear that. You listened to what we asked about a couple of weeks ago, and you brought that information forward to us tonight. And I really appreciate the attention to the detail that you did. So thank you again. I also just want to say that, and I think Melissa touched on it a little bit, and so did Catherine, there was a prioritizing, but the prioritizing was about remote with the intention to have in-person learning. And so I think that as this board has moved towards that, we have tried to do the best that we could in balancing that. So it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Becky, Brian, and Chris, I know we've all kind of talked a little bit about the subs, but it seems like it's a higher amount of subs that are being needed in our schools at this time. And so whether or not that's something that you can bring back to us next time that we, have a report as to why that is, why we're seeing such a high number of subs being needed. I think that would be of interest, to me and hopefully the rest of the board to understand, what is happening there. And I don't know if any of you have an insight to that now, or if you just, it looks like Brian, and even the superintendent.
Well, I'll speak for a second and turn it over to Brian, but I think part of it is, we're getting our second doses, and Brian and I, for instance, got our second doses, and I had no reaction at all, but Brian did have a reaction. And so on Fridays, we've had a greater need for subs, and I think that, along with the pandemic and the general fear that comes along with that, we're still in a global pandemic. There are still people, we've asked people, if you have any symptoms, to stay home.
Yeah.
And over time, I know a lot of teachers, a lot of folks, they come, if they're a little bit sick, they come to work and do the work. And we've asked them specifically to not do that. And so we've made the problem more difficult in that way. And I believe, and Moselle can speak to this when she comes on later, but I think our sub pool is about half of what it normally is. Again, we're in a global pandemic and some people are just not going to want to do that work. Brian, did you want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to add that although I whined to Superintendent Manning, I did not miss any work at all. I was there.
He did not miss he didn't miss a minute. No.
I did miss some work because I thought I was about to die. So I own that.
Well, I appreciate you answering it the way that you did, because I think that those urban legends start out there, that for whatever reason, people think, teachers aren't showing up because they don't have to. And the reality is that there are a lot of reasons, that we're seeing this.
Yeah, I can add one more if you like. I just got a text from a teacher that said, that it's stressful, and just the mental health of our adults too. We talk a lot about, and we work a lot on our well-being for students and teachers, but it's a very stressful time for any number of reasons.
I agree with you, and I'm glad you said that, because that was actually another comment that I was going to make, is we do need to take care of our people. I think it's really important. I also just want to say, before I ask my next question, that I really want to thank our community as a whole for stepping up and wanting to be subs in our classrooms. For those that have done that, thank you so much. I think that we need to tip our hats to all of you tonight to say thank you, and we appreciate it. And however we can continue to bring you into the schools and make you feel safe and comfortable, please let us know how we can continue to do that. So the last thing, Superintendent, that has been brought up is, looking at why does it look different at the middle school than it does the high school? And one of the things that a lot of parents have talked to me about is that at the middle school, they have been able to opt in or to opt out. And at the high school, they haven't. That's not something that that kids have to do. So at the middle school, you can see kids more engaged. The teachers know who's going to be there. It's a little bit different atmosphere. I think that Chris talked about, that you've got some teachers that are teaching remote, some teachers that are teaching, in person, and then you have that blended that's going on.
Yeah.
And so as I've talked to a lot of the families, they are saying when, especially if they have a middle schooler, and it's really hard for me not to want to turn and talk
I
to you
know.
like this.
I know. I feel the same way.
I know. That they have a middle schooler and they have a high schooler, and they can really see a difference between that opt-in and opt out versus the high schooler that doesn't have to do it, who would rather say, well, okay, I would rather stay in bed and not turn my camera on and participate in the classroom that way. And then you have that small group of kids that are going down that, you know, depending on who the teacher is, each classroom can look a little differently, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, as we look at that, what I would say, Superintendent, is as we move to the 4 days a week, which in some of our schools, and I think, Brian, you talked a little bit about between 300 to 600 in each school, that would actually allow us to do 4 days a week with that number, you know, that for us to really be thinking about, you know, that last quarter being an opt-in or an opt-out, instead of it just being, oh, you can, you know, basically choose.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're hearing that, but that is
Yeah,
definitely
just I'll
something.
speak just briefly to that. Brian mentioned before, though, that's really one of the things that we thought was a good idea to keep numbers down. And while it does keep numbers down, I think Brian, you want to go ahead and speak to that. That has been I think that is a problem, and I think it's something that we should visit when we do come back and talk about this 4-day. And I do like your idea of thinking about it as an opt-in or opt-out for fourth. But go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to add that I would say that the 3 traditional high school principals that I talked to earlier today echoed what you said, Board Member Sweat, about that opt-in, opt-out piece has been a challenge. And the other piece they said that that I heard from a couple of them was that they think that going to 4 days a week, it's not going to just double the number. They think it's going to be a little higher than that from talking to students, because one of the detractors for students has to do with just peer groups. And when you're divided alphabetically, and they think if they know they're going to be all their friends and connections are going to be there 4 days a week, or at least the majority of the time 4 days a week, that more of them will probably come back then. And though that presents some new possible challenges and hurdles, it's also something that could really benefit, you know, getting our numbers more stable, and what you alluded to is that from that opt-in, opt-out standpoint. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Christy, for those questions. I appreciate that. Dottie, would you like to ask some questions?
I don't really have that many questions right now, but I'm really thankful to the board and teachers for helping students get through. So thank you.
Thank you, Dottie. Thanks. We appreciate you as always. Thank you for this conversation, board members. Let's go ahead and move to the next item on our report agenda, which is the Human Resources Report from Moselle Orton. Moselle?
And we got Logan here as well.
I was going to introduce him.
Yeah,
So,
welcome Moselle and Logan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having the opportunity to address some of these questions and concerns you have about leave opportunities for teachers, and also about substitutes. I think we've talked a lot about substitutes. I just really want to be sure that folks understand employees don't have an option if they have been exposed to a COVID positive person under the changing rules of what exposure looked like, especially when there are exposures in their family, in their residences. That has to play its course through every person who gets sick. We have people who've been exposed, for one reason, maybe a family member, maybe somebody, at a grocery store, whatever, and then exposed again. And so as that plays itself out, people are out a lot more than they would be in any other year. And so then when you look at things like, substitutes are not applying at the same rate as they have in the past. It is not just this district for which it's a problem. It's a problem across not just the state, but the nation. And then even if you have these substitutes, they're subjected to the same quarantines for either exposure or positives. And so there you have that going on. And then to the point about the vaccines, On a 3-day weekend, the Thursday night before a 3-day weekend, we had 800 people receive a second vaccine. And if you look up the data about anywhere from mild symptoms to quite severe symptoms, like people literally thinking they got COVID from the shot, they're so sick. And even if just half of the half that would have symptoms were not well enough to drive or to perform their job functions, then that happened that Friday. And Fridays, are difficult sometimes to staff with subs to begin with. To the question about what we're doing besides pay with substitutes, a couple of years ago, we received some feedback when we were talking to some substitutes about, the sense of welcomeness and that kind of thing that they feel when they go into schools, because they are itinerant. Unless they're in a long-term sub position situation in which they're subbing maybe in a class that they know the students for a long period of time, or it's someone they know that they're teaching for. It's very, very hard on substitutes. They're in a new school, they don't know the routines of each school. And so we developed a binder for the school, whoever greets them, the school secretary typically, to give them the binder that has a layout of the school. It talks about the bell schedule. It has a map of where they can find the faculty room. They were going to be assigned a buddy teacher, either the teacher next door or a similar grade level teacher or content level teacher that was in proximity if they had questions or concerns. And so we have put that out there for a couple of years. Now, obviously this past fall, with us not being in-person instruction, that didn't get reminded. And so maybe now is a good time to put that back out and remind the schools that we need to be sure that these folks who are so easily, not connected to each environment that they're in because of the frequency of the change, that we get back into reintroducing those binders and making sure that the subs know that they're welcome there, that they're an essential component of keeping those classrooms going. I also want to address how creative our teachers and our administrators have been, along with the network directors, the support, the extending themselves. We've had teachers at one school take on a class during their prep at an entirely another school to help support a teacher who had a sudden emergency or needed to be gone for whatever reason. And people throughout the district were picking up a class during their prep to help get that school and that group of kids through for a few days until we could stabilize the situation. And so, that's just one example of the amazing amount of creativity and willingness, serious willingness that people have put forth to make sure that our kids get covered when they're in person. And even in remote, there have been teachers who picked up, an additional class all day long, running their remote classroom. To the issue of shortages of subs, if you'll recall, a couple of years ago, we negotiated with SLEA a pay schedule for when teachers have to pick up classrooms with extra students because of sub shortages. And so this pandemic has just incredibly exacerbated the situation. And I'm so sorry that there have been difficult situations where maybe a class had to go to an auditorium or be joined with another class in the cafeteria for a day or two. As we get more people vaccinated, as less people get this contagion, as we have more people feel safe to come into the classrooms, whether it be for substitute positions, or we're able to fill more para jobs and that kind of thing, I'm hoping that this will become less and less of an issue. I mean, we can see the perfect storm of this becoming less and less of an issue right now. So I just want to thank you all for your patience with this, with your understanding that, everybody's just absolutely super extending themselves to try to make it work. We've had district employees who have gone out and covered in buildings for a couple of days to try to make sure that we can get through a crisis. And so just so you know, folks are trying really, really hard. So if you have any other questions about subs, I will re-implement the binders and get those going again. Another issue, keep in mind that other districts started in person in August. And so people who are available to sub and were not concerned about going into in-person classrooms have been subbing in other districts. And so those who are available to sub in person have been already, applying for and used in other districts. And so hopefully as we move into cases where they can get more days, if you will, and get more hours, as we have more and more students coming in person and more opportunity for them to sub, we will be able to recruit more subs too. Are there any other questions about subs that we can talk about? Does that cover it? Please don't hesitate. If you do, send me an email. If you've got an idea, we continue to brainstorm about ways to recruit. In years past, at the beginning of the year, we put requests out on the signage of schools, the electronic signages. Please, we need subs, sign up here, and it's had the web link. Schools have put it in their parental announcements, their newsletters that go home. We'll get that going again. We'll start sending out requests that they do that immediately. But I just wanted you to know that I feel like this has just been a spectacularly amazing year of compounding factors that have really, really put a crimp in our ability to get subs into the classroom. So there you go. Okay, so Logan and I are here. We're going to present to you on leave options for teachers, the benefits that we have available for leave for teachers. And we're just going to kind of switch back and forth. If you want to interrupt me or ask questions or however you all want to move forward, that's great. I'm not going to go in to try to teach you all of the ins and outs of all of the criteria for benefits and that kind of thing, but I just want you to have a good scope of the breadth of opportunities we have for people who have medical needs to take leave from work. So the first one I'm going to talk about is what's referred to as FMLA. It's the Family Medical Leave Act, and it entitles eligible employees to have covered leave. That means leave that is protected by law, whether or not they have sick leave. If they qualify for family medical leave, they're protected from any kind of job action because they're on leave. And the covered employee, it can be that they are ill, a spouse, a son or daughter, or a parent. So they can take leave even if it's not for themselves under family medical leave if they qualify. There are many, many things that someone can qualify under FML. It includes birth of a child, adoption, fostering, that kind of situation. It involves care for a spouse or a child or a parent that has a medical issue. There's a list of criteria. There is also a component to family medical leave that covers for a military family member and care for them. And that's an entirely different amount of leave that people can have. So if you have any specific questions about family medical leave, recognize that it does require, that we go through a process in which there's verification from a healthcare provider that there is a medical issue. There are two different kinds of family medical leave. One is continuous. So you could be on family medical leave up to, depending on your qualifications, up to 12 weeks, or you can have intermittent family medical leave. And I'll give you an example. Perhaps someone with migraines, who the migraines are so severe that they cannot work if they have an onset of a migraine. They can't predict that, they can't plan it. So that would be an example of an intermittent FML, where someone would come to work and maybe, an hour or two, whatever, into their shift, they start to get sick and they would need to go. And so that's an intermittent scenario. A continuous scenario would be someone who, is ill with, let's say, so sick with cancer or cancer treatments that they cannot perform their essential job functions for a period of time. And family medical leave can cover whether they're caring for them, whether they are ill, their parent, spouse, or children. So that's family medical leave in a very, 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 very tiny nutshell. That's a huge issue. I'll go ahead and turn the time over now to Logan to go ahead and cover our sick leave bank options.
So one thing that we have that's very unique to Salt Lake City School District is our sick leave bank, which is available to our career status teachers. And it's available to teachers who have a serious health condition themselves. And if they meet certain criteria that's outlined in our written agreement, the sick bank is available to them. And it's based upon the ability and the availability of the sick bank hours that each teacher contributes to each year. And it's available for a maximum of 960 hours, but it can only be used for the employee's personal health condition. But it is an option for our teachers that can be used in conjunction with FML or as an extenuation of it or as a completely separate issue. So it is a nice benefit that we have specifically for our teachers. So Mozelle's also going to talk about long-term disability.
So long-term disability is a benefit for teachers. There is a waiting period to qualify for long-term disability. Obviously, the term itself is disability, long-term disability. You would have to be ill with something that would be an extenuating long-term illness. Often FML is a bridge. So somebody's been out for family medical leave. They're just not going to get better anytime soon. So then they can apply for family medical leave. And there's other options that we'll cover here in a minute that also can bridge from family medical leave. They can be granted up to 60 more days of leave. They have to be diagnosed as unable to return to work at this time. In other words, they cannot perform their essential job functions. We provide assistance to the employee for submission for long-term leave. We actually ask employees if as they are either out on family medical leave or they've taken extended sick leave, that we get that application going about 2 months prior to the time that they think they're going to need extended leave. The collection of medical information can take quite a bit of time, and our long-term disability carrier is Cigna. And so Cigna actually is our insurer that pays their wages for long-term disability. And so that covers long-term disability, again, in a teeny-weeny nutshell. And so now Logan's going to go ahead and move on into discussing what we call extended leave out of the written agreement.
And so third option for our teachers is extended leave, which is essentially leave without pay. Extended leave is available for an employee's illness, for infant or child rearing, the transfer of a spouse, or even potentially further study or renewal. And the extended leave is outlined in our written agreement with the SLEA, and it's available for teachers for up to 1 year. And so it can be granted for any length of time up to a year. And if teachers qualify, they can elect to continue their health insurance at their own expense and also be able to use their sick leave as part of that extended leave and continue to get paid for any accrued sick leave that they have. I'll turn it back to Moselle to talk about our last option.
So our last option is everyone pitching in to be super creative because of the pandemic. In cooperation with Alan and the budget office and the network directors, with support from all cabinet members, some work with other situations, individuals, the principals, we came up with a plan in which if a teacher's exposed and has to quarantine, whether that's because they're positive, showing symptoms, or has been exposed and they're under health department order, but they are not so sick that they can't work. In other words, they can perform their essential job functions, they just can't be around anybody. We can have that teacher teach remote for the time that they're under quarantine. Now, who's covering their in-person classes? This is where the CARES money and the additional hires and the deployment of paras, at times administrators, other teachers pitching in during their preps and so on and so forth. So teachers who end up quarantined because of COVID can actually teach from their home or wherever they're teaching remotely, while the kids who are choosing to be in person are in person. Their class is proctored by another employee, and the teacher doesn't lose sick leave, nor do the kids lose having that teacher's expertise in presenting the instruction. And this extends our ability to not have to, close classrooms and go to remote, or if we end up with a super shortage of personnel having to go to remote for a school. So we're pretty excited that we were able to come up with that option. And it doesn't matter whether it's a sub or a para, a student service, a student support assistant. It doesn't matter who's covering the classroom. What matters is that the kids still get that expertise of their teacher. It just happens to be in that remote format for a few days until they clear quarantine or their symptoms. So that about covers everything that we were going to address this evening. I'm ready to, whatever you need.
Thanks. Thank you, Moselle. Superintendent, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I didn't. Just if there's any questions, we can certainly entertain those now, but
Okay.
If not, we're good.
Let's go ahead and let board members jump in and ask your questions, and we'll just go make sure everybody's got a turn before we move to the next. So just question and move to the, go ahead. Go ahead, Mohammed.
My question is about FMLA. Can it be denied? And if so, why?
So family medical leave can be denied. And again, all of anything that has requirements in which we receive information from a healthcare provider, we require that information from a healthcare provider. So someone can apply for family medical leave and the healthcare provider say, no, they're capable of performing their essential job functions. They're not so sick that they can't do this job. And so the other conditions under people apply for family medical leave for a variety of reasons. And unfortunately, some of those are because they don't have a medical condition. They apply for family medical leave for to care for a neighbor or to care for somebody who doesn't qualify under the act. So yes, family medical leave can be denied. We're hypersensitive to trying to be sure that if someone does have the appropriate medical documentation, of course, we are going to approve that family medical leave based on the recommendations from a medical provider. Did that take care of your question?
Yeah, so just to reiterate this, so if a staff or a teacher has some terminal illness and, they needed leave, and there is records that they have that terminal illness, if they come and they apply for FMLA, they should be approved with the doctor's note.
Yes. So I don't like to speak about hypotheticals because, it's kind of a dangerous path. But yes, if someone is ill, and it doesn't have to be terminal for family medical leave. Remember the birth of a child or fostering or adopting a child, you can get family medical leave for that. And it's quirky. As an example, if both parents work for the same employer, they have to split the 12 weeks.
Yes.
They don't get each 12 weeks. So it's quirky like that. But family medical leave isn't just for terminal illnesses. There is a whole list of reasons that family medical leave can be granted. So if somebody needs family medical leave, and it has to be, remember, they're on leave.
Yes.
They can't get family medical leave and then sit at home and do their job. They're on leave. And there are actually civil personal penalties for interfering with family medical leave. So we're very, very careful that the supervisor knows, unless it's an emergency, unless there is some really critical thing that you have to communicate with the employee, that employee's on leave and it is protected leave and you don't touch it. So yes, that in your scenario, if we received the appropriate medical documentation and someone was seriously ill or met any of the other criteria, yes, it should be granted.
Fantastic. Thank you, Moselle.
Certainly.
Other question? Go ahead, Holly.
So my question is with that last thing y'all came up with, that plan. I think it's great. Just to kind of reiterate, and the only reason or the only thing that you would accept for the teacher to be teaching remotely is if they were exposed and they have to quarantine. Is that true?
If it's COVID related. So if they've been exposed or they're sick, let me try this again. They may have COVID, but they're not so sick that they can't perform their essential job functions, right? And so if they've been exposed and are required to stay home or are COVID positive, but can still perform their essential job functions, in other words, teach, then yes, they would have that opportunity benefited benefiting them in relation to the pandemic.
Yeah, and then and all that needs to happen. Like you said, they could be teaching it, but we still need an adult in the room, whether it's a paraeducator, a substitute, another teacher, or someone that could be just there supervising the room while the teacher teaches, right?
Right. And we've been doing this since we went back to in-person, and again, the shortage of having human bodies has been difficult, but remember that perfect storm of 800 second vaccines, and it was, all that jazz. So hopefully we will get in a position where through this program, with decreasing cases and decreasing exposure, this will really help support keep classrooms open.
Perfect. Yep, that makes sense. I'm glad that plan has been happening, and it's going to happen, because it's, yeah, that, like, you're right, that perfect storm happened, and we still have those layers of people getting the second dose, still a couple of weeks and over a month for sure left. And so, and the other thing is,
yep, I'm Thursday.
Right?
Thursday.
And then you might just not be here on Friday, right? So that's what happens, right? And so, but my siblings work for the Department of Health, and they call people, that's what they do. And she was telling me, she's like, even once you get your second dose, you're not really immune until 2 weeks after. And I was like, oh, dang. So that's another thing just to kind of think about for people, for the public, for their teachers, for everybody to remember.
Good point. Thank you for raising that. The health department does have different rules for people who have gotten their second vaccine and have had the 2 week, I like to use a Princess Bride reference here. It has reached full potency. And so in that scenario, good, thank you, Becky. In that scenario, there's a lot less reason for people to quarantine if they've gotten that second dose and had that 14-day delay. So that will also help bring us to the point where less and less people are getting quarantined and quarantined routinely.
Thank you. Nate, go ahead.
Thank you, President Ford. Moselle and Logan, are there any like medical or health conditions or pre-existing conditions that are recognized by the CDC where employees can petition Human Resource Services to request to teach remote? Or is that, and if so, what might that process be? And if not, I understand that as well.
Well, so I want to be careful how I answer this, because again, we're back to a hypothetical. So any employee who believes that they have a medical reason that would alter their conditions of employment can apply through our department, and we will vet their application for any available benefit. And so in regard to your question, it would depend on an individual case. It could be, and one of the things I didn't address because it's not a leave program, but I want to be sure that people remember the American with Disabilities Act for people with a disability. And, we have many employees who have an ADA accommodation, and you pass them every day. You don't know the difference, because someone with a disability, the accommodation, the reasonable accommodation, is there so that they can perform their essential job functions. So I'm going to give you a really blatant example. I hope it's not, too out there for you, because these things happen. Pretend there is a teacher who is a quadriplegic and they're in a puffer chair. Okay, so they can still teach, right? What do they need? They need their lungs evacuated. They need suction. They need help with and assistance with feeding. They may need other support, toileting and that kind of thing. The aide is not doing the teaching. The aide is supporting that employee and their life needs so that they can perform their essential job functions of teaching. Does that make sense? Does that help? So under ADA, and people get this confused, having a disability or applying for a disability doesn't mean that then you are not required to perform your essential job functions. What we as the employer are required to do is to find a reasonable accommodation such that you can perform your essential job functions. Does that help?
That does. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to emphasize that there is a process, and I
Yes.
thank you for going through that process on the individual basis. And I know that
Every one of them individual. Two people can have the same cancer, the same chemotherapy, but there's just enough difference that there would be different ways to help support them and that they would receive benefit of one of our programs.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members? Catherine, go ahead.
So thank you so much for all that information, Moselle and Logan. I'm wondering if you can type it up briefly and get it to us. That would be really terrific, just in outline form. So it was wonderful and it was very helpful, and I'd love to see it just so I can refer to it if I get asked any questions. And
I
then
certainly will.
Thank you so much. The other thing I've heard is that I've heard from a couple people just tonight saying that I'm a sub and I don't get called. What should they do in that situation to make themselves more readily on the sub list?
If they would just send me an email, we will get into the system. There is no way we could manage running subs if it weren't for our software and automated system. If they'll just send me an email, Joe, Logan, me, Jody, somebody will jump in there and see, is there a glitch? Is there, because of all the extenuating work that schools are doing trying to cover classes, it may be that they're not even submitting for subs. It may be that they have a partner coverage kind of situation. And in some cases, the schools that need subs, the individuals may not be willing to go there. I mean, I'm guessing because I don't know who it is or what the problem is. It could be, I promise you, a software or computer glitch. So if they'll just email me, and if I can't manage it, I have amazing people that we work really tight as a team. You think about Loretta and Cheyenne and Michelle, just killing it, trying to get these massive numbers of FML and leave and ADA requests that we've received this year. So just have them email. Calling is not going to get very far. I could be sitting right here right now, and obviously if my phone's ringing, I'm not going to answer the phone. But if they email, if I'm in a meeting, I can fire it off to a couple people and say, will you get in this and check right now? And they'll do it. I mean, I have an amazing team.
Great. And I also mentioned to them that they could have accidentally checked only, second grade or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, because if the applicants will go in and make sure that they've completed their application, make sure that they haven't marked only one school or only one content or something like that, that would be super helpful. But if they are, if they're like, no, I've checked everything, I don't get it, I'm not getting calls, we will do whatever we need to do to make sure that it's not a computer glitch.
Okay, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
And Moselle, is it an easy process if they had clicked second grade only and they want to go in and say, hey, I'm good for anything now? Is that a simple process? Then they just go back in?
I can't speak to that. I have not done an application from an application side, but I can tell you that if it isn't, we'll fix it on our side. And
Okay.
Sam just jumped on, so I imagine he's prepared to answer that. So go ahead.
Okay. And Logan's got his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Logan.
I know from the candidate's perspective, it is a setting within their online, not the application. Once they set their own preferences within the system, so subs can log back in and set those preferences and make changes. So one week I can select one school, the next week I can select all the schools.
Sam, did that cover it, or did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, they have the ability to edit their preferences either by dialing into the system or through a web portal. Yeah, so Logan had it correct.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right.
I just really want to thank you all for inviting us. Much of what we do is behind the scenes, and much of what we do has so many little tiny complexities. And I'm just grateful for the chance to, even in a tiny way, get to explain some of it. So thank you so much.
This was very helpful, Moselle. Thank you to you and to Logan for coming and presenting that. And I look forward to seeing your typed up all these different options, and we appreciate the work you do to support our teachers. We know how important the work they do is, and so your work supporting them is really essential.
Thank you so much. And I want you guys to know too, I mean, on any given day, we have an amazing staff in this district. And I don't just mean in my department or in the district office, I mean across this district. And, you know, we've got a problem, we call a principal, we call a teacher, we call whoever, whatever. And you guys hear some of the, you know, bad news, which could just be somebody's perspective. But I'm telling you, we have an amazing group of people in this district, and all the way from our child nutrition people who solve problems in the moment of how to get kids fed, transportation, grounds, our SLEOPA, you know, all of our school secretaries and school assistants and administrative assistants, our paras. I mean, we have a vast network, and I'm telling you, they are amazing people. So it isn't just us. They help us solve problems too. And thank you to the board, because this has been an amazingly rough year, and your consistency and your support and your recognition that we are experiencing things we've never experienced as you are. Thank you so much. Just appreciate you all.
Thanks, Moselle. It's definitely a complex ecosystem that you're overseeing. So thank you for your support. I mean, it's important that all the parts be healthy for it to work. So thank you. All right, board members, we have one item left. It's on our action agenda. It's the board policy B1, Board of Education legal status, responsibilities, and ethics. This was moved forward from previous board meeting and directly to action. We had a few items that we needed to review, and it was asked that it be brought back on action. So does the policy subcommittee want to speak to this? Christina Kindle, are you here?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay.
No, this didn't go back to policy subcommittee. I made those 2 changes that we discussed in the last board meeting, removing that one provision and then including a different name for SCCs for SPA, charter school. And I think the board as a whole was going to discuss the grade levels for their student board member. But other than making those 2 changes,
those changes are made.
Yeah, those changes were made. So
thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. And then I think the board wanted to look at do we want our student board member to be juniors or seniors or grade levels for that. So I'll open that up for conversation, unless I have a motion. Is there a motion on this?
I think it would be useful for us to hear from Dottie again.
Okay. I think that's good. That's good advice, Catherine. Dottie, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, sure. I can kind of just recap what I said last time. Okay, so I do think that seniors can utilize a student board member position to their fullest potential if they would like. But I really do think that juniors have a real active investment in schools. And the reason why I know this is because I've reached out to numerous student body presidents across Utah, and they're all 18 right now, and they're about 3 months from graduating, and they're kind of experiencing senioritis, which is their right. I think that they've definitely earned it. But I do think that students deserve someone who's engaged and indebted to them. And to me, that means a junior, but if the board decides otherwise, I'm comfortable with that as well.
Thank you for that feedback, Dottie, and thanks for sharing that again. So, board, I'll take.
Oh, well, has his hand up.
Thanks, Will. Go ahead.
Just with procedures, we can make the motion to move it forward, and we still have discussion right before the. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, I want to make the motion to. Let me see. I just want to say it right to accept the board policy B1, board and education legal status, responsibility, and ethics with the edits that were mentioned. Yeah.
Second.
You're muted.
Sorry. Okay, the motion is that we accept Board Policy B1, Board of Education Legal Status, Responsibility, and Ethics, with the mentioned edits. I have a motion from Hoa Lee and a second from Catherine. I have discussion to the motion. Christy?
Thanks, Melissa. So thank you for the work that's been done on this and for the input, from Dottie and from the policy committee and from the board. Having sat on this board for a long time, it's been my privilege to work with over 18 student board members, and it's a variety of personalities and commitment. I would just say that we've had really wonderful juniors and seniors on this board. We even had a sophomore at one time. And I think that, it's been a pleasure to work with them. They've all been thoughtful. I honestly, it's such a small percentage of kids that might have lost a little bit of interest towards the end, but otherwise they have really stayed and really worked with us and been such a great input. So it'll be interesting to see how this new process is going to be working. And I look forward to seeing, as always, who the new student board member will be after Dottie leaves us. And we always, are sad to see our graduating person moving on, and then the new person coming on to the board. So thanks for all the work that's been done around this. I've really appreciated the conversation.
Any other comments to the motion? Hoa Lee?
Just have a question, and then with that, so the motion I made, and it says seniors only right now. Is that what does it say, Christina? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, is that what it says? It says seniors right now only, like incoming seniors. I like Dati's. I like Dati's idea, especially when we were thinking about the council, because that senior, that person that served as a junior next year could be a senior helping that council. That was just something I think I just remembered now thinking about. That could be a really good just institutional history person that helps the youth and advise. But the school board, the student board member is a junior, but that person that was it last year is a senior helping that youth council. And so that is a cool way to potentially do it. So I can amend my own motion if that people feel okay with that, but I will let a kind of discussion happen about that a little bit before if I can make an amendment.
Okay. So just to be clear, we have a motion on the table. Howell's potentially thinking about amending his own motion, but we'll continue speaking to the motion it is right now. Go ahead, Catherine.
I also really like Dottie's idea. And I think that it's really great to have the past board member there to mentor the current board member, and also to step in along with the person that was appointed as a as the assistant council person. So we would have two people there that could step in. So I think that's a really terrific idea. The only thing that I would say is that for the next year, I think we should make it open to juniors and seniors. Our goal was always to make this accessible to as many students as we can. And so I think to cut out a senior that might be wanting to apply and didn't have a chance to this year would be a mistake. So I think this year we might make it open to juniors and seniors, and then next year just ongoing just juniors. That's the only suggestion I'd make.
Any other comments to the current motion?
So I'm a little confused. So Christina, can you just tell us again? Is it say just seniors in the language?
Yeah, it does. That was the direction I was given. And I do want to be clear that in your motion, it would be, just for clarity's sake, the outline of the senior and the student board member application and the guidelines is not necessarily in your policy. It's in the student board member application and the student board member application guidelines. So those are 3 documents that you would either need to approve and move forward on your action agenda, and also give me direction to change if that's the will of the board. But it's not in the board policy that it says seniors, but it is in the application and the guidelines where it talks about seniors.
Exactly. So that, I mean, that's where the confusing part is because the policy has never said just seniors. This is just in the guidelines. And again, you know, respectfully, I just think that it would be a mistake for us to even down the road to cut out a senior at all. You know, I think that but that's a conversation for the future. You know, right now, what we're looking at is what's before us. And I appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. The motion on the table speaks just to the policy, not to the procedures. So we could potentially decide to take action on the procedures, but that may be something for a future conversation.
And again, there are no procedures with this. It's strictly the policy,
Okay.
the board member application, and the board member application guidelines. There's not an administrative procedure with this.
Thank you, Christina. That's what I meant, was talking about that application and that process, that we would potentially change that. I do feel like it's important that we keep it open to juniors and seniors. And we have talked about having, and potentially sophomores. I mean, I know that we've had really good opportunities. I think this process has been really good because the goal has been to get more engagement, more opportunities for more students to participate. And I think that as long as that's our continued goal, we're headed in the right direction. And so really applaud the policy committee that started this conversation. And Dottie, thank you for your input. I support this policy and engaging in the conversation as we move forward. Any other comments to the motion that's on the table? Sorry.
Oh, no worries. So what question for Ms. Kendall, would you recommend that we not adapt any language in this policy to include juniors or seniors at this time, or address this when we bring this back up for procedures?
So there are no procedures at all attached to this. All you've got are those 3 documents. That's all there is. So on the application, it specifically indicates that they need to be a rising senior. So if the direction from the board is that it would be available, that the process is available for rising juniors or rising seniors, I would just need to make those changes on the application and on the application guidelines, because those are the 2 documents that reference the applicant being a rising senior as they're currently written. But there is no administrative procedure anywhere. There's not going to be at the next conversation. It's just these 3 documents. So hopefully that clarifies it. But the policy itself talks merely about you having a student board member and the student board member's role. The policy itself does not limit your student board member to being a rising senior. That's what's in the application materials that are attached to this policy. Does that clarify it?
That does, yeah. And I just, want to be clear that, and voice my support for rising juniors and rising seniors to be added to that application, and subsequent procedures when those do become available to the policy Nope. Okay, never mind. Just to the application then.
I can make the changes in the application guidelines as they're currently written, because the current application guidelines are the ones that talk about the various committees and the reserve student board member. And so those are sort of your procedures for how you're going to adopt a student board member. They're just not called procedures, but they're currently in place, and they're called your student board member application guidelines. So I can definitely make the changes to both those documents.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that, Ms. Kendall. And President Ford, I would like to move to amend Board Member Organista's motion on this matter to include rising juniors and rising seniors in the guidelines for the application process.
So do I have a second to that?
Okay, so Nate's amended motion and second from Christy is that we move to accept policy B1 with the mentioned edits to the policy, and amend to those are done. So we adopt the policy. The motion is that we adopt the policy and we amend the board member application to include rising juniors to the application process. Motioned by Nate, seconded by Christy. Let me repeat so that we have it completely clear. The motion is that we move to accept policy B1, Board of Education legal status, responsibilities, and ethics, and we amend the student board member application to include rising juniors in the application process. Any discussion to the amended motion? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on the motion.
On the amendment first?
Yes, on the amendment first.
Okay, yeah. Huele, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yeah.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
The amended motion passes. So that negates the need for that first, the primary motion. So we've got motion approved to adopt or to accept policy B1, Board of Education legal status, responsibilities, and ethics, and to amend the student board member application to include rising juniors. Thank you, board members, for your attention to detail on that. I appreciate it. Moving along, we
still have to vote for, we still have to vote for the actual motion though.
Oh, okay. So let's go ahead and vote for the main amendment.
No, the main motion.
Main motion.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Huele,
Sorry. There we go.
No, you're good. So Huele, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for your patience with me as well. All right, let's go ahead and move to board member report. If needed, we'll go ahead and go around the table.
No, I'm just going to say that I'm so happy we have successfully voted to, have Dr. Gadsden become the next superintendent, and that search is over. That's all I'm going to report. I'm happy for that. And I'm just happy for him too, and for our community. And there's a lot of great work to do from now until July that I know our community and our board and our staff and everybody and Dr. Gadsden is ready to do. And so I just wanted to kind of share I was going to say felicidades. Felicidades means our celebration or congratulations, but it also means happiness, which is funny. So I'm very happy for this.
That's awesome. Any other board members have a report? Go ahead, Nate.
I just wanted to, echo what board member Organista said regarding Dr. Gadsden. Really looking forward to the negotiation process and seeing where that takes us. I'm confident that that'll be a smooth and easy process. And the only other thing I really wanted to report on was President Ford and I had an opportunity to participate in the president and vice president training through USBA. I thought it was very helpful. There's a lot of resources that we have available to us, and want to highlight the recommendations from board members Sweat and Kennedy relative to trainings that our board can partake in, as well as our new board members that they may have missed relative to training opportunities that did not exist because of the pandemic. There was a short survey that President Ford and I got to participate in relative to coordinating trainings through USBA. So there will be more details to come from that when Melissa and I have a chance to regroup and also talk with folks at USBA as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. That was a formal request that was made to board leadership, and just wanted to follow up on that in the open meeting. And we'll keep you posted on all of those things as well. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Christy.
Thanks so much, Nate, for that little plug right there. I just wanted to thank everybody who participated in Day on the Hill. And, I've really come to enjoy the team chat that we have put together, that Yandri puts together, and Alan and Larry and Catherine and I have participated in, and I think everybody has had a chance, to participate in that. And it's a great way for us to come together and understand the legislation, that's going on up at the Capitol. So I hope we can continue something that's similar to that. I know that eventually we'll all be together, but I appreciate that. Also, I just wanted to first thank my thank my precinct. I know all of you feel the same way, but I just wanted to personally say thank you to Precinct 7 for just allowing me to have the time that I've had, to go through this superintendent search. It's been a huge commitment for all of us. And I appreciate you keeping me informed with what's going on in the schools, knowing that there's been such a time constraint on all of us. And we've been trying to get to all of our meetings, but we haven't been able to quite get to every single thing. So thank you to Precinct 7. And then also just to thank our board members here tonight, to Jenny and Mohammed and Melissa and Nate and Joali and to Catherine. This has been a journey that all of us have been on. And, we've had our ups and downs, and we certainly have had our disagreements, but in the end, I think that, we have really coalesced together, and I have appreciated the camaraderie that I have felt, especially over the past couple of weeks with each of you. So thank you very much. And Alan, I'm glad that you've participated in those meetings with us. I think that it's been very helpful, to have you be a part of that. I also want to echo what Catherine said earlier and to thank Superintendent Madden. I mean, he's not off the hook yet. I mean, I think he knows that, but I appreciate all the work. I mean, he certainly didn't know that this is the kind of year that we were going to be having, but appreciate all the hard work that you've put into it. So thanks to each of you. And then to Dottie, thank you for your insights. We've appreciated you as a student board member through the superintendent search. You've had some really great insights, and we've all listened to you. So thank you for the outreach that you've done to students across our state too. Across our district, to provide information about that. So thank you.
Catherine and then Mohammed.
I just wanted to briefly echo Christy and say that we had a great day on the Hill because they did it in a format where we couldn't see faces. I'm not exactly sure who was there, but we appreciate people from our board that were there to listen to the information about pending legislation that affects schools, and also to thank Mohammed for joining us. I think we've had most people join us. I'd love to let Jenny know that she's welcome to join us. We've had our JLC substitutes come, but there's no reason why we just can't have more than 3 board members. So, but we should, if people want to see what JLC is like, Fridays 11 to 2, it's really interesting to hear about the bills. And I've really enjoyed having the other board members and other people from the district that are there, usually Yandri, Alan, and Larry, come and give their opinions about how we should cast our vote. Because I do think it's a vote for the district, not a vote for the JLC rep. And I happen to be the USBA JLC rep. And I do think of it as a vote for the entire district. And so it's really good to have everyone weigh in on those decisions. And I really have appreciated people's insights. So I'm glad to have that continue and to have us be understanding where we all sit on these issues, and that we're almost always unanimous in how we want to vote. And matter of fact, I can't think of a time that we haven't been unanimous in how we would vote on whether or not to support a specific piece of legislation. So it's been really good to be there together, and I appreciate it.
I just want to say congratulations to our district and to the board here. Larry, my goodness, you have done an amazing job leading this ship through all the storms, we have been facing. Thank you. You have left a great mark in the history of the district, for sure. So I'm going to do something that has not been done. I know, I'd like to say also congratulations in other languages, because we do have families who speak French, families who speak Arabic, and probably Berber. I'm not 100% sure about that. So with that said, let's start with Arabic first. مرحبا بكم والله مرحبا بكم مبروك 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 على دائرة سالت ليك سيتي. والله إننا مستعدون وفرحون خصوصا على أن المدير العام دكتور جاتسون إن شاء الله راح يساعدنا في هذه الدائرة. والله مبروك. Mesdames et messieurs, félicitations. Nous sommes vraiment très contents qu'on va voir Dr. Gatson. Il va vraiment faire un très bon travail ici parce qu'on a besoin de ça maintenant. Je suis vraiment très fier de lui. 8 mois, 10 mois, والله الفرح نيتي لنا الدرير لنا نشكر بزاف من غير تقلم باش هادي سنة بالضبط من الله. الحمد لله بعدها تنوفق هي المدير العام دكتور جاتسون ان شاء الله يرغي يعاون بزاف يرغي يعاون باش نعدل الدائره النغيد. مرحبا بكم وشكرا جزيلا. Thank you et merci.
That was, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you. Do I have any other comments from board members? Jenny or Dottie? Good, okay. Thank you, board members, for taking time to share those reports and really appreciated that. I'm feeling feeling emotional about it, actually. Thank you, Mohammed. That was really moving to me. I really love who our board is. I love the direction we're moving. I'm excited for the opportunities we have with Dr. Gadsden. I'm even grateful for the rocky path we've been on because it does help us to grow stronger. And community, I'll echo what Christy said. Thank you for your support of us. Our commitment is to you, to your children. We love them and we want to serve them, and we will continue to do our best to get better as we do that. Thank you all. Superintendent, do you have some closing remarks for us?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, again, along with everybody else, thanks to all of you. I know I'm not off the hook yet. I get that. And, but the thing is, I have not lost my interest or my love for this district. And so I will do everything I can going forward to help Dr. Gadsden get adjusted, understand the landscape, and even when I retire, I'm not going away, so I'll be available to help him in any way I can because his success is super important to me, and so I'd like to do anything I can to help him. And then I'd also like to I just want to clarify, because we're going to just meet in 1 week, and I just want to make sure we come back with the things we decided on. So we're going to do we're going to talk about the 4-day-a-week discussion. If there's any update on Senate Bill 107, we will certainly bring that back. There are some other things that I know will be on the agenda. We will see if we can find some information on how technology is working and not working and bring that back to you. And then there was one point I know I need clarification on, and that's when we ended the late start conversation. I'm not exactly sure where it was left. I believe that we asked Mr. Chatterton for questions, but I'm not sure what the nature of that was. I mean, what do we want to do with late start from this point, I guess is my question.
We want to hear from Mr. Chatterton and the late start committee, the specific things they want board direction on.
Okay.
Knowing that we're moving forward with implementing what the board has already voted on. So
okay.
What do they need board direction on so that they can make their plans?
That's what I thought it was, and I just wanted to make sure. And I'll work with him, and we'll have that for you next Tuesday.
Melissa?
And Superintendent, I have notes as well from this meeting about things that we need to bring forward.
I think
Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that we talked about too, is defining the school day. I mean, that is basically what we would be doing. So we would need to be able to figure out what that's going to look like. So what would the framework look like to do outreach about defining the school day and putting everybody on a specific time?
There was a question about the timing of when they would need board direction. There was a question about, like you said, defining the school day, but also, are we holding, even if you don't have buses, how does that work? See, I'm looking through my notes. We're looking at, well, I'll go through my notes and
Okay.
we'll pull out
Okay.
these questions.
Okay. That's fine. I think I understand that we're not asking for that vote or anything next week. We're just trying to come back and answer those questions that we were asking today. So that's great. And I'll touch base with you, President Ford.
Okay. Yes, and always, board members, this agenda belongs to us. So if you've got things that you want to talk to us about in leadership, that would be great. And we'll be moving forward with lots of great conversations as we meet again next week, and then again March, and we maybe kind of move into a little bit more regular board meeting schedule. I really do appreciate the commitment you've given to these additional meetings that we've had through February. We've accomplished a lot though, so thank you. All right, with that, I'd like to call this meeting adjourned, and